Review of agenda. Does everything look good?
Yep.
All right. Review of bills. Bills look fine. Payroll. Vice Chair McNeil.
Payroll's in order.
Terrific. So we'll go to FHS, student representatives.
Hi everyone. So starting off with some whole school news, Panther Pride Night was last night and many 8th graders were able to learn about different sports and clubs at the school, and it was a really big success. Midwinter break is next week, where students will have off from February 19th to the 23rd. And over this break, over 30 students and 5 teachers will be traveling to Belize for an exciting trip to learn more about biodiversity and sustainability. Course selection ends today for 8th graders, and we'll move on to 11th graders in the coming weeks. NHS applications for the spring are due by February 26th at 3 p.m. All Town Showcase Chorus Concert and Orchestra is March 12th, and the All Town Showcase Concert Band is March 13th, both at 6 p.m. in the FHS auditorium. And then DECA club members will travel to Boston on March 7th to March 9th to compete in the statewide competition. For some sports news, boys basketball is currently ranked 9th in the state, and they play Attleboro at FHS tomorrow at 6:30. Girls basketball also has a game against Attleboro at 6. The girls varsity swim team placed 3rd overall at sectionals and will continue to the state meet this Saturday, so best of luck to them. Congratulations to the girls track team for being #1 in the Hockomock for the 3rd year in a row, and congratulations to the boys for placing 3rd overall. And then congratulations to both the varsity and JV cheer team for placing 1st overall at the invitational competition this past weekend. For class of 2024 news, students can now order their graduation caps and gowns now. Senior banquet is scheduled for April 5th. And invites for the all-night party have been sent out, and tickets have to be purchased by March 5th. For class of 2025 news, prom is on May 3rd, 2024, and the theme for prom is luxury. Us officers were actually able to visit the new venue last week, and it was super pretty, so that was awesome. And prom tickets will be sold after February break, with more specific dates coming soon. That's all I have. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much. And so I'll open the floor to questions or comments from the committee members, starting with Member Charles.
Yeah, only comment that I have is I had the opportunity to be at FHS yesterday for Panther Pride. It was after our community relations meeting. I was able just to see what's going on, and it was just amazing to see what Mr. Hanna was doing in the auditorium, and it's really informing folks of what's to come for high school. But 2 was really around all the kids that were there for all the clubs. I mean, you saw a lot of clubs there just representing and just really introducing the upcoming freshmen into like what opportunities there are. And it's a really great way to get folks excited and see what's to come. So great to see that, kids were spending their time to share it with the, upcoming class. So thank you to all the students that participate, and I'm just really glad that we do that for our upcoming freshmen.
Awesome. Thank you. O'Sullivan?
I don't have any questions. I got to see Panther Pride too. Great job to all those kids and all those clubs and all the administrators. And congrats to those teams and DECA going. Good luck to everybody. And I like all the action. It's been great since COVID to get everything up and running, and the enthusiasm I saw last night. And so thanks a lot.
Awesome. Vice Chair McNeil?
No questions for me, but thank you very much for this update. I really appreciate it.
All right. Gallagher?
No questions from me. Thanks for the update.
And Griffith?
No questions. As always, we appreciate your time. Hope you had a good day.
All right. Terrific. Then, Ella, thank you very much. And we'll shift over to the superintendent's report.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Ella and I have very similar messaging. I will just say that in addition to what Mr. Charles said, Panther Pride Night was held yesterday. It was a success, and I appreciated 2 things happening. One, I went as a superintendent, but I was also there as a parent of a rising 9th grader. So it's always interesting to put those two lenses on. We were joined by our whole, basically 3/4 of our central office team was there as well, just to interact, support FHS and the work they're doing, and welcome our 8th grade, rising 9th grade families. Mr. Hanna and his team, his leadership team, really facilitated what I thought was an informative night where he brought people into the auditorium, as Al said, shared information about course selection and some of the updates, changes, and tried to provide as much information as possible with his department heads and directors. In the gym, his leadership team helped organize and structure all the club's activities and sports that you heard about. But overall, I thought that idea of dividing and conquering and splitting the entire 8th grade across the town up so that they could be in 2 locations and then flip-flop was smart. And I thought, just as a parent, I appreciated the effort that they put in with that. The second thing I wanted to bring up was we had a half day after our last school committee meeting, so on Friday, February 2nd, and our pre-K educators engaged in safety care training and continued learning about the new IEP. Educators also furthered their professional learning with the science of reading at the elementary level. And the secondary educators focused on UDL, curriculum development, and assessment. And the next half day for students is scheduled for Wednesday, February 28th. Before that, we have February break. I wish all students and families a safe and restful February break. And finally, spring conferences are approaching. So for families of students in grades K through 8, and there are 2 early release days scheduled for March 5th and 6th. So please be on the lookout as teachers start to email to communicate out about those, or principals may also be reaching out to communicate about those spring conferences. And this concludes my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll kind of go down the line for any questions, starting with committee member Al Charles.
No questions. Thank you.
All right. O'Sullivan, go ahead.
No questions at the time. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Vice Chair McNeil.
None from me, but thank you for the update.
All right. Aaron Gallagher.
No questions.
And Paul Griffith.
No questions for me. Thank you.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Then we'll kind of move on to our guest presentations.
Okay.
I'm just going to tee it up.
Let's just promote. So we, as you mentioned, Mr. Callahan, we do not have our Annie Sullivan highlight today. Those are typically done in person, particularly because we have a student pledge, a student who gets to come in, as you've all experienced at this point. We're scheduling that. So we'll move right into the next presentation. We've invited Jennifer Knight from Safe Coalition. She is the director. She's leading Safe Coalition. I'm going to promote her as I reacclimate to Zoom here.
It's all set.
Oh, great. Thank you. There you are. Hi. All right. So Jen is joining us from Safe Coalition. And I know Mrs. O'Sullivan brought up just about the resources that were available to the town of Franklin and how we're utilizing them since that meeting. I know Jen and I have met. I know Paula is part of running the mental health wellbeing task force, is in contact with Safe Coalition as well. And we're just excited to have her come in and talk about the opportunities for students that Safe is providing. And she'll give an overview of her programming. And the other thing I would say to the parents on the call, there are opportunities that as we move down the road where students may be referred or could have the opportunity to engage with Safe in some education around a variety of things. And we want to put that out there because those will become part of the conversations that our principals and assistant principals are having with families if it directly connects to supports that they offer. So without further ado, I'll kick it over to Jen. And are you set to present, Jen, or do you want Tina to do it?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, Tina, if you want to, I don't know if I have access.
No,
Yeah,
I
that
can do it for you, and you can just that
would be awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to see you. I wish I was seeing you in person, but here we are. So my name is Jen Levine. I'm one of the co-founders of the Safe Coalition. And, so much of the work that we do has to do with youth and families. And so I'm just really excited today to be able to talk with you really about one specific program that we have at SAFE. I've had a lot of conversations with most of you about the organization. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the substance use diversion program. So Superintendent Jagir had come to the SAFE Coalition about 2 weeks ago, and we had a fabulous conversation about what we were seeing with our youth and ways that we can provide layers of support, both preventative and reactive. So a little bit about SAFE. So we at the SAFE Coalition are a judgment-free community organization. We are committed to leaning into gaps in programs and services and really listening to the needs of the community members when it comes to mental health and substance use resources. We are staffed by professionals. We deeply believe in peer support, and we are incredibly committed and are incredibly loving of all the volunteers that we have at SAFE. We really are dedicated to breaking down the barriers to success and healing and recovery and building up layers of support together. So the program that I'm going to speak about today is this diversion program. So coming out of COVID, one of the trends that we were recognizing that were happening in middle school and in high school around the year 2021 were increases in suspensions related to vaping. And so most often what we heard from schools were that students in middle school and high school were found using a vape product in the bathroom that, of course, was not in compliance with the school handbook. And so we together developed an online 2-day diversion program. Now, at the time, the only real program that had been developed was out of Stanford, and it was called the Stanford Tobacco Toolkit. We had partnered with Stanford, and they actually gave us access to their cannabis toolkit as well. So with the Stanford product and another product called Y-Try, which is a social emotional wellness program, in 2021, we developed an online version of meeting with students who were actively suspended. And this was a way to engage with them while they were suspended in the hopes that the days that they were with us, they would get back to school a little bit sooner. So in 2021, what really led this program, we were seeing spikes in substance use suspension. Absenteeism was beginning to increase. I think at this point, we were really wondering, were students going to come back to the classroom? Why were kids skipping? But we weren't able to really call it a trend yet. And many youth that we worked with coming back from COVID had moved away from non-academic activities, meaning kids who maybe played rec sports were no longer playing rec sports or no longer qualified because they aged out. Maybe previously they had taken an instrument lesson or had some other extracurricular which they were no longer involved in. In 2022, these trends kind of increased in a few different ways. So we continue to see a spike in substance use. However, instead of nicotine, we were really seeing a THC increase. We were still seeing an incline in suspensions. We were much different than 2021, seeing an increased rate of students with limited credits, meaning that they were skipping classes, skipping school, and they were actually not gaining the amount of credits to move to the next grade. We reported on with parents just a shift in the home. There were a lot of parents spending time with friends and really engaging in their own activities and spending less time with their children. And the cannabis industry really came into play in 2022 in our communities. And 2023, 2024, which is where we are right now. So there's been a lot of shifts and changes over the past few years. One significant change, which really impacts our program, is a new DESE requirement. So in 2021, there really wasn't an expectation from DESE on substance use suspensions. And so we created one style of a diversion that was online. In 2022, we recognized that we really needed to make this an in-person event. So we had a 2-day in-person program. And in 2023, looking at the DESE requirements, we actually developed a full 3-day inclusive program with the DESE requirements related to suspensions from substance use. And really, the DESE requirements highlighted that there needs to be documented alternative remedies for suspension or expulsion when it comes to substance use. And so we were really excited to hear this, because in the 4 areas that DESE hoped that students would have the opportunity to be part of a remediation program, SAFE actually already carried the certifications and licensure to hold this. We can go. So what are we hearing from our youth in our program this year? This year, we have a few different interesting things that are coming up. The first thing that we hear from our students this year is that students are not worried about their ability to control their substance use. Another area related to families, my parents used to smoke and they're fine. I want to be rich someday, and every dealer I know has more money than my family. And the last, I don't have any other way to express anger than to be physical. Every fight starts from Snapchat and TikTok. If we don't fight, none of it is real. So the Up in Smoke program that I've kind of been talking about, this diversion program, what we really do is we provide an alternative to suspension. So in lieu of a 10-day suspension related to substance use, mental health, behavior concerns, we bring the kids into our program for 3 days and offer them a social emotional wellness program that helps them better understand how they make decisions, how their substance use or their anger are impacted and connected to their mental health, and how we can help develop their ability to host conversations, to host challenging moments, and really move forward with life goals. And what we're kind of most excited about is that so many of the students that we work with are excited to come back to SAFE. So this is just a quick snapshot on the ages that we have seen since October. So we launched the 2023-2024 program the first week of October this year. We work with 12 different school systems, and this is kind of the breakdown of kids. I will say that we do try, just because of ages and maturity levels, to kind of break up the sessions. So what typically will happen is if a school system feels as though a student could benefit from this 3-day in-person program, the school will send a referral, and that referral will be brought to our office, and we'll kind of review the case, review the student, review the age. And, if we have a whole group of seniors, we may talk with the family and encourage them to attend the following week if we have more middle schoolers. But this is our breakdown this year. So just to give you an idea of some of the slides. So again, it's a 3-day program. Students arrive at 9 a.m. and they leave at 2 p.m. We provide breakfast and lunch and snacks for all the kids that are in the program. And we can go to the next slide. And each day really focuses on something different. So the first day of the program, we welcome the students in and we really talk about substance use. What is addiction? What are the substances that we're actively using? How are they impacting our body and brain? This second day is all about social emotional wellness. So how are the things that we're doing being impacted by how we think about them? And then the third day is a full day on restorative justice. We really wanted to lean into the idea that even though these students were not with us for weeks and months, that we could help them better understand how they verbally communicate with each other and leaning on the restorative justice principles. So the next few slides here are on some of the statistics that we have pulled from our program. When a student enters our program, they are given a questionnaire, And all of the numbers that you'll see throughout the presentation are based off of this questionnaire and not from any other data set. So cannabis, what's most interesting to us at SAFE is that when we started this program in 2021, the most common substance was nicotine, and that was the most common substance that children started on, and that's just not the case anymore. We have most of our youth starting cannabis use before they go to nicotine, which is really interesting. Average age is 13 with an age range of 10 to 16. 72% inhale. That would be usually smoking a vape, and other alternatives to that would be inedible. And 81% of the youth that we have connected with this year use cannabis multiple times a day. Cannabis and wellness. So 97% believe that substances can be helpful. This is a fabulous fact because it allows us a place to enter into conversations with students. Oftentimes we'll talk to kids about where they are in their decision making, and to know that the vast majority of students that we work with know that what they're putting in their body could be harmful to them is a fabulous door that's already open for us to walk through and explore a little bit. 69.7 have a family history of substance use. That's pretty significant. So a lot of what we talk about is our environment and how we were raised. And, to know that 69% of our youth are surrounded by substance use when they leave our office and when they leave school gives us a much better idea of how we can help them in real life when they are outside of our office. And 87.9% have attempted to decrease their use. This is another incredible, beautiful, wonderful fact. So often when children are referred to our program, it's because something really challenging has happened, or there's been a series of really challenging events that have happened. And what we know is that our youth are actively trying to decrease or quit their substance use. They just don't have the skill set to do it on their own. Substance use and behavior. So this, I think, is really important for us to talk about. In every single district that we work with, we have seen a huge spike in hands-on behavior. Last year, we saw a significant spike in social media use, and certainly we're still seeing that, but the physical behavior challenges are something we're seeing everywhere. So to give you a little bit of an idea here of the mental health, trauma, and family connectedness that our kids are experiencing, more than half highlight having anxiety and depression. Trauma, 42.2%, so almost half believe that one specific event in their life has impacted their substance use. And 57.6% believe that their family impacts their substance use. When we ask a little bit more deeply about that, most of our youth will say that their family actively uses substances, and to not actively use with them is actually insulting to the nature and relationship of the family dynamic. So polysubstance use. So most of our students highlight that they are active in additional substances. And some of the questions that we talk with them about are, what is the legal age to purchase cannabis? Who are our children buying from? How do we teach our children to assess risk? How do we role model decision-making? All of these are conversations that we have with the youth and with our families on the impact of substance use and how it's going to impact every other area of a child's life. So, for example, if we have an adolescent who is actively around substance users at home, and those substance users are actively aggressive in every style of decision-making, that child's ability to assess risk is going to be much different than someone that comes from a home where there is not violence and substance use in their everyday life. So polysubstance use, again, really interesting for our youth. So the top 4 categories of substances here, in addition to cannabis, nicotine, alcohol, caffeine, and mushrooms. And while all of our youth who are coming to us with a substance use concern highlight that they don't feel like they need to learn about fentanyl, we highlight that they do need to learn about fentanyl because the statistics in Norfolk County absolutely show us that the majority of opiate-related substances and magic mushrooms right now do have fentanyl in them. So a huge part of the program is spent on cannabis use. And the reason why is because there are so many styles of conversation that our youth are engaged in earlier on, whether it be on social media or with family or in magazines that they have access to, that highlight that cannabis is not as damaging as we believe that it could be, or that it's no different than the style of cannabis that was used in the 1970s. And what we know is that early and often access to cannabis use will dramatically impact a child's ability to function well, physically and emotionally at home and in the classroom. So one of the earlier statistics I highlighted is that the average age of first use is 13. And I also highlighted that many of the youth are actively using cannabis every day. So if we have a 13-year-old or many 13-year-olds who are starting at 13 and are actively using every single day incredibly potent THC, by the time they get to high school, their ability to function well with reason and calmness and have an ability to reflect is so much lower than what we would hope and expect it to be. And that's where we believe we're seeing a lot of these behavior concerns starting. Just one quick little fact, 66 joints in 1990, rolled joints, equal 1 THC cart today, and our youth go through 3 to 4 carts a week. So themes in 2023 and 2024 that are different than other years that I think is really important for us to share. So behavior, we are seeing an incredible increase in aggressive hands-on applications with our youth. And when we meet with the kids in our office, we have never had a problem with aggression. But that is because I think, there's nothing that we're holding from them. And when we talk with our youth about aggression, the most common belief is that if the students, the teens don't show themselves in a physical way, then all the things that are being said online about them are true. And, we try to talk with our kids about how we can use our language, how we can understand and appreciate others' feelings, the harms that social media can provide to us. And we hope that over time, the youth that we work with will slowly begin to understand kind of how they were raised, maybe the environment that they're in, the substances that they're using, their ability to seek mental health support, and how all of those pieces could be impacting their behavior. Stimulant use, huge increase in stimulant use this year. A big focus on that is on energy drinks. And then another focus on that are on energy tabs, mood enhancers that are over the counter. You can buy them at gas stations. We are seeing kids early and often drinking energy drinks and not really having the insight to talk about why they need them so early. Trafficking. So we at the Safe Coalition believe trafficking to be an experience where anyone who is purchasing a substance or there's a transaction that's placed into a vehicle and is moved is considered trafficking. So a vast majority of our youth this year are involved in hitchhiking. They are involved in driving or trusting their dealer. We do ask the kids if they can name their top 5 trusted adults. Most of our youth will highlight their dealer as one of those trusted adults because they show up when they say they're going to show up. They show up where they're going to be when they say they're going to be there. And many of our youth have received a ride from their dealer before. We also have had, and we've actually seen this at the SAFE office firsthand, children being left by family with the expectation to get a ride on their own. So we focus a lot more on trafficking this year because we really feel like there is such a gap of understanding on what trafficking and what grooming really are. Gambling. So I know that this has been something that's been on the school's radar and certainly in the other districts that we work with, but the increase in sports betting through online portals, many of the kids that we worked with when we actually used the word gambling said no, but when we added sports betting into the questionnaire, we had a lot more answers. And so again, year after year, we learn lessons and we're realizing, what are the words to use so that the kids feel like they actually are engaged in this activity. And risky behavior, we've seen a huge spike in unprotected sex, a huge spike in early pregnancy, in early access to substances, meaning we are seeing a lot more kids, even younger than 13, trying a substance for the first time, and illegal fight operations. So we've just met with so many more kids who are like sneaking out of the house at night or are not, there's not a lot of parent or guardian supervision. And so they're going to certain locations or certain neighborhoods and either having a party or having fights. And so that's been something that we've been really seeing and focusing on too. But a couple positives. So this year with the restorative justice component, we've really seen our youth be ready on that third day to open up about what their needs really are. And I mean, that could mean anything from, I just wish my mom and dad weren't on their cell phone as often as they are, or it could be like, I really need help because I am on a CRA and I really don't want to go to juvie. And then we've also seen a huge spike in supportive language in the classroom, meaning we have youth from different school districts or different backgrounds really supporting each other on what they individually want to accomplish. And a few weeks ago, we had a group of ladies in the office, and we've just never had that before. Usually we have a mixed group, and the girls became friends, and they come to the SAFE office and hang out, and they go to each other's houses to hang out. And it's been like a month and a half, and they're still not using. So there are some really beautiful, wonderful, amazing things that are happening. But I also think it's really important for me to share kind of what the program is, what we do during the program, and then also, these other pieces of themes. Harm reduction models. So we recognize that most of the youth who are brought to SAFE are brought to us because there is a suspension or some kind of hardship that's attached to them. And so we also know that the majority of kids coming to us are not actually ready to completely stop their substance use. So conversations that we have with family, conversations that we have with the children are around harm reduction models. What we would not want is for a child to feel like they have to stop cold turkey, or for a family to feel like they have to stop cold turkey. Really, what we want is to decrease someone's substance use while increasing all their mental health supports. These are a few tools that we use with our kids and that we use with our families that we work with. Every child that comes to SAFE is offered the opportunity for a child ID card. Again, the majority of kids are buying from folks that they don't know, from dealers. And so this is a way, if they were ever to go missing, that we could give this to police. We have used this 3 times over the last 3 years. The Why Try Journal is the social emotional wellness program that we talked about. And then these other 2 programs or offerings is the Smoke Screen and the Great Consenter for Addiction. Both of those we provide to parents as a way to better understand kind of substance use, cannabis use, but then also how behaviors are increasing in our youth's lives through the Great Consenter, and how mental health and substance use are so often intertwined in that. And that's it.
All right. Jen, thank you so much for this presentation and all that you do for this entire community. I think not everybody may know, but like the Safe Coalition literally opened their doors for the mental health well-being task force from us and hosted us for many years, as we were able to have a lot of different programs and kind of utilize your space for just the meeting rooms themselves. But it's just been a tremendous asset to everybody here in Franklin.
Thank you. We're happy to be back. That's for sure. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I was like trying to speed date this a little bit, but yes, Lucas, or I don't know if I'm supposed to call him.
Well,
I don't know if that's fair.
yes. Well, I mean, through the chair, I'd like to just say, Jen, we visited together, and then you came to the secondary administrators meetings and talked about the programs. And one thing that we were left with was we wanted to have a communication strategy out on having you present in a public meeting to the school committee, putting out written communication to families about some of the options, whether they elect to do them, but also inform them of the tools in our toolkit to get students the help they need. And what I found very interesting when we met, and then when you met with our admin team, is the organization is founded on substance use, but what you've come to really develop in the past few years is mental health supports, behavioral health supports, and trying to look at the whole child and trying to provide whatever they need is what they get. And one thing that I just want to impress upon the families that are on this call or people watching in the school committee is the referral process has been updated. You're going, kids who engage in aggressive behavior, have mental health concerns, or distribute behavior or display behavior that's just not in line with what we expect of students in school. If it leads to suspension, there are opportunities, not just with drug offenses, but other offenses, to refer them for that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Out of the building, work on yourself, take the ACEs questionnaire, do the questionnaire, learn more about yourself, invite a parent in on the Wednesday afternoon to meet with the counselor and the student, and then have 3 full days, and then have a successful reentry with notes from SAFE on how it went. Did the student participate, and have a sense of how are we accepting and welcoming a student back into our environment that demonstrated. So I just think it's important for everyone to know, and we'll be sure to continue to communicate this, but the work that Jen does with this model is just phenomenal. And we're fortunate in Franklin that it's right in locally within our town, and it's very accessible. So I just wanted to hit that as part of the larger picture.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And I'd love to entertain any questions or comments from the committee. We'll start with Al Charles.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Jen, for joining. It's definitely appreciative to see this information and hear what's going on. I mean, when people think about school, they don't realize all the other things that are impacting or preventing children or students from learning and being successful. And then the services that your group does helps them get back on track, which is much appreciated. The part that jumped out at me, you mentioned the trends in the year over year, how we're seeing some increases in substance abuse. How is this year compared to previous year? Like in terms of is it a larger increase? What are you seeing?
So I think what we're seeing is just different substances. So for sure, stimulants are just so there. We have so many more kids actively engaged in stimulant use than we did before, and that's definitely different than other years. I think cannabis and nicotine are always there, but definitely stimulants that wouldn't come out in a talk screen. We're seeing a lot of over-the-counter styles of pills that again it wouldn't come up in a drug screen. And so that is more where our focus is right now, is really educating kids on, yes, we don't want you to be buying substances from a dealer ever, right? And even if it is cannabis, no one legally is selling a child cannabis. End of story. So everyone would be considered a dealer. But I think that there's a myth right now with students that if it's sold at the gas station, it's not that harmful. And definitely that's not the case. If that's helpful.
It is. Thank you. And the second thing that jumped out at me during your presentation was around You said what, 69.7% of the students said that their families also are have substance abuse as well, so they're around it. Are there things that SAFE is doing to help the family kind of end that substance abuse so that it sets that student up for better chances to not continue their usage?
Yes, great question. Thank you for asking. So SAFE has 3 divisions of care: adolescent wellness, family recovery, and collaborative care. So for every child that's brought into SAFE, they and their family have access to the entire family support division. And so that could be meeting one-on-one with a clinician, or one-on-one with a trauma counselor, or meeting one-on-one with a peer, or it could mean going to any of the 6 support groups that we have. So we would love to meet with the families and connect with the families as much and as often as possible. And that's what we offer to every family that comes to SAFE, is the opportunity to meet with us on Wednesday afternoon and with the counselor who holds that program if the family is open to more resources. And it's, sometimes we have a parent who's really excited and wants to get engaged. It's much more common for us to get a call 6, 7, 8 months after a student has attended the program, when someone calls and says, hey, my daughter attended this program a few months ago, and I'm just wondering if there's a way that I can make an appointment to connect with someone. Either we're struggling at home or we need additional resources. And that's so important to us, that families know that even after their child leaves, they will always have access and care through SAFE.
Thank you. Appreciate this.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. How about Ruth Ann O'Sullivan?
Hey, Jen. Thank you for coming in. Yeah, I'm part of the wellness task force, or the mental health task force that was sort of originated through and involved with you guys. So I hear it all, and it's jaw dropping. So thank you. Such a gift to this district. We're so lucky to have you. And it's no secret that our schools are so under-resourced right now, and that the mental health challenges that we're seeing are catastrophic. They're just enormous. And so to be able to just be able to do the right thing with these kids that are going through these tough times, and not just suspend them, and not require people to come out of the classroom or out of their administrative role to try to give these kids their individualized attention, is just such a resource. So thank God for you, because I don't know what we would do if we didn't have you. It's so much for these schools to be managing. It's sort of a trend that's been difficult, I think, for schools. Is just the sort of therapeutic services, it's just escalating. And, we're in no better position than the parents are in to know what best to do. It's like these school administrators and educators are just having so much trouble trying to manage it. I'll sit at a sports game, and I'll be talking about what's going on with kids and how difficult it is, and they'll say like, oh, we should have an adult in front of every single bathroom at the school, and I'm like, with what funding? Like, it's just like these sometimes parents don't realize it's not a very small group of kids that are engaging in this type of just harmful behavior. And so thank you. I did want to just reiterate, it's I think you said 24.2% are like 9th graders, 9.1% are middle schoolers. So just for anyone out there who's listening, that's a third of the kids are freshmen or younger. So to think that we can just suspend these kids and somehow they're going to miraculously get the help that they need, it's so significant. So thank you. And I did want to ask, and I don't want you to go into a whole spiel, because I know you have like amazing workshops and things for the parents, but where are these kids getting these like vapes that they're using? Is it typically older kids, like relatives? Like, are they getting it? Are dealers dealing the same stuff that the cannabis stores are? Is that?
These are great questions. So the majority of the kids that we work with do have a dealer, a dealer that they have access to through Snapchat. And students, most of the kids that we work with who don't have a dealer through Snapchat would have a family member that provides them that access. But again, what we say to the kids is, for us, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's your best friend's mom who's giving you the style of substances or the dealer that you met through Snapchat. At the end of the day, that adult does not have your best interests at heart. And we're having to teach kids really early on that not every adult has their best interests at heart, even if they aren't actively hurting or harming them. And that has been a significant shift change. There are no bad kids. There are just incredibly excruciating circumstances that kids have to live through. And so that's kind of how we feel about all the kids and a lot of the families that we work with.
Right. So thank you so much. And
thank you.
33% of our kids are using substances, and the majority of them are getting them through dealers on Snapchat. That is such a critical point for parents to know, because, it's a harmless enough app if you don't know what it's capable of. So thank you.
Thank you.
For now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. McNeil?
Thank you very much, Jen. It's great to see you here, and thank you for this presentation. This is just great information to have. A lot of it's extremely harrowing. Some of your statistics that you're sharing, it's really scary. What today's youth are faced with, and going through, and the just all the different avenues that they have for for starting substance use. But thank you for this program that you're doing, because it seems like it's just a truly fantastic opportunity to just provide the assistance and the supports that they really need. Just, I guess, a couple questions on that. I mean, yes, this sounds like an absolutely wonderful program. So you're saying that it's primarily for suspension and expulsion diversion, correct? Like, are there other people that participate as well?
Yep. So the majority of referrals we receive are from schools. We do have the opportunity for parents and students to self-refer. Mm-hmm. So I think we've had 6 students self-refer themselves this year. And typically when that happens, we work with the school district to have that be an excused absence. And then we have parents who will refer their child. So it's not uncommon for a parent to call us and say, hey, I was doing my child's laundry. I found 4 vapes in his pants. I'm really worried. I know you have the program. Can I place him in the program before he gets caught at school? And we always say yes to that. But really, we have the same link for everyone. It is an online form. They fill out the form, and then our staff will call, give the family or caregiver an update about what the program is. And then we hope to see the child that following Tuesday in our classroom.
Oh, excellent. That's great to know, because that's when you were presenting us the information of what your run through of the program entails. I mean, in my mind, I was thinking, this seems like excellent information to prevent a suspension or expulsion even before a student is put in that position. And if there's, I don't know if you guys are thinking about trying to expand that in the future, specifically for groups of kids who aren't facing that yet, but would still definitely benefit from that information. But yeah, I mean, that's wonderful, because I mean, just having the knowledge of how substances affects just the brain, but also but mechanisms to deal properly with social emotional issues and different coping strategies, and get to the root cause of negative behaviors. I think that's it'd be wonderful information to use on the preventative side as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. And then I guess just to that, what would you say, what would you say are ways that, we as a school committee or district, we as a community and families can really help and provide our students with supports to prevent substance use and to prevent them from landing in these situations in the first place?
That is an outstanding question, and it can be incredibly layered. I think the 30,000 foot view is that our kids are not okay, and we have do accept that. And it's not a character flaw in our children, and it's not a character flaw of our parenting. It is an outcome of the world that we're in right now. And the earlier that we can kind of cry about it and accept that and allow our children to start receiving services much earlier on in life, I think the more access our kids will have to heal before they get involved in more harmful situations or substances. And so often we meet with families and we have kids and they're smart and they're in the National Honor Society, or they're in sports, or they're in DECA, and all the accolades that we associate with someone who is successful in middle school or high school, that those accolades do not mean that child also is not really deeply hurting inside. And so having those open conversations, being loving with ourselves, being loving with our children. And I do think that within SAFE, the expectation that we all hold is that there are no bad children, there are only horrific circumstances, really allows all of us to see the kids that walk through our doors as people who are looking for support, as well as their families. And so that would be my kind of wish here, is that we keep ourselves open. We recognize that kids need support, and we aren't afraid as adults to walk them into getting that support early before we have larger problems.
Oh, well, again, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thank you so much for this program and all the work that you do. And we really appreciate you sharing all this with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What about Erin Gallagher?
Hi, Jen. First of all, thank you for, what an amazing resource to the community that you are, and everyone at SAFE is. Kind of continuing off of what Dave asked, you talked about self or parent referral. How do families in our district find out about this program so that they can refer themselves in? Like, how's that information getting out there now? How can we as a district, help to increase awareness of it? Because it's clearly an amazing program.
Love it. Yes. Thank you. I think we receive referrals. Sometimes we'll see them from the schools. So the schools already do send us some referrals. Sometimes we'll do doctors' offices in town will send us referrals. And then parents who maybe have already had a child through SAFE, or just know what we do and call. Like, we have so many people who call our support line and don't really know what they're calling for. But then through the conversation, we'll say, it sounds like this might be a good program for you, or for your child. But I do think more conversation about this, more people knowing. I think that this was one of the intentions of tonight, was to kind of share what this program is and really making sure that people know that it's there and that folks can utilize it at no cost. It's a grant funded program through the Bingham Trust.
That's incredible. Way back at the start of your presentation, you mentioned very briefly that some of the kids that are coming through the program had extracurricular activities that are no longer being offered, or that they're no longer involved in, and that, that void for them might be, almost an introduction point, a lack of time to fill. And it kind of made me think about, after school programming that can't be or isn't offered right now, and what you're kind of seeing as far as that gap for students that are coming into the program.
Yes. Thank you so much for mentioning that. So yeah, it's, we saw it really out of COVID. Many of the youth that we worked with just weren't engaging back in their rec sports, or they had aged out, or just like general activities. Even like taking a walk, hiking, playing an instrument, things that people enjoyed, they just weren't as engaged in. And we're seeing that like tenfold right now. I'm not quite sure where it's coming from or where it's going to, but I think that there's a large concern that many of our middle school youth, not just in Franklin, across all the districts, just are not engaged in programming, either because the programming doesn't exist anymore. There's a lack of funding. There's a lack of transportation access. And that is 100% an entry point. So we have had kids who will come in and say, like I I wasn't an athlete anymore, or I wasn't at the top of my class anymore. I wasn't, I wasn't all of these things, but I always fit in with kids who could do drugs. Or I could always fit in with someone older than me who was doing drugs. And so that extra time, we're definitely seeing is an entry point. And then just social media in general. And so when you have younger kids with access to social media and unlimited time on their hands, that's where we're seeing a lot of increase as well.
Well, it's hard to hear, but important to hear. So,
I know. I'm sorry. I hate doing this sometimes because it is like doom and gloom, but this is why we're all doing the right
no,
thing
it's so
because,
absolutely. No, thank you so much, Jen. That's all my questions. And yeah, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you. And Dr. Griffith?
Well, as you know, whether it's a benefit or a curse, being last, I feel like a lot of really fantastic questions and points have already been raised. But for me, what I think is really striking here is just how important it is, the atmosphere and the attitude that you really convey here. That kind of positive, the approach that how much these kids matter, kind of across the board. There are situations we all consider and hypothesize and talk about them, but really making sure that focus is on making sure that these students and these children are supported and encouraged and really, cared for, both inside the home, inside the school, and then outside, through your organization. I just wanted to comment on how much that matters, and how much I think that's important, that, what you're doing and your approach to it is really hard. Not just for the folks going through it, but, especially for y'all, in that kind of support system. So I really appreciate it. I really see there's a massive value in it, and we, as has been echoed multiple times, we were very lucky to have you all here. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you for explaining it, and just for being there. It really, I think the impacts are very widespread and felt very deeply in the community, and I look forward to being able to see what we can do to help support it further.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
And, Jen, once again, just thank you for everything that you do for this community. As a dad, all the statistics, that you bring up terrify me, but I'm also just incredibly grateful that we have you as a resource and in the entire SAFE Coalition. And however we can help as a school committee, just to kind of better, continue to build those relationships and provide the make sure that all of our students kind of get the amazing services that you offer. If there's any suggestions at any point in time, please feel free to reach out, because it's just such an amazing service that you all provide over there. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And honestly, working with the Franklin schools is a dream. I feel like we're able to have these conversations with the superintendent and all of the principals and the assistant principals and counselors. And it's not like that in every district. So to be able to lean in and have conversations so that kids get access to care is amazing. And I feel like we're able to do that here. So thank you for having me. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. We'll put out some information, Dave, just to answer Aaron's question. We'll also, from the school perspective, put out some information on our end on access to SAFE and what types of things. Or Jen, maybe you and I can circle back on that. We planned on putting out something, and I think it would just help us set the table for those conversations that either parents want to have with you directly, or we're referring as a result of information we have. So we'll this was stage one, but certainly you can expect further communication.
Sounds great. Happy to do it. Teamwork.
That's right. Get that brain now. That
the mega brain, it's coming.
Yeah. That's a teaser. We'll tell you about that another time. But there's something coming from SAFE that I think an interactive opportunity for kids to learn more about the brain, and I won't spoil it, so I'll just stop there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I'll leave.
All right. And I know the next thing on the agenda is a budget overview, but I was actually looking to see if it'll be agreeable with the committee. I'll entertain a motion just to move around the agenda and actually just to jump to discussion item, in this case A and B, just the field trip proposals.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right. Any discussion, questions? Then all those, quick roll call. Al Charles,
Yes.
Ruth Ann O'Sullivan,
Yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Aaron Gallagher,
Yes.
and Griffith,
Yes.
and Callahan, yes, as well. Any opposed? Motion passes. So we'll just jump over to discussion item A, Costa Rica field trip proposal.
Okay, thank you. So we are joined by some outstanding educators at Franklin High School who will be the advisors to 2 international trips. The first group I have up is Miss Rosie Asian and Miss Vicky Bema, both educators at Franklin High, and they're proposing the trip for Costa Rica. And then after that, we have Mr. Chris Penzer and Chris Kelly, Mr. Chris Kelly here as well to talk about Italy as well. But to just kick it off, I see Vicky's on and Rosie is here. Excellent. And just to set the table a bit, you're all familiar as a school committee with EF Tours, so you'll notice some consistency in previous trip proposals. So I've spoken with Vicky and with Rosie, and I gave them permission to kind of know where the things that are redundant and kind of just use in the spirit of time, but certainly there'll be time for questions at the end. And with that in mind, I'll kick it over to both of you. So welcome.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us tonight and giving us the opportunity to present our trip. Also, thank you all for everything that you do to support our schools and our students in school. We appreciate everything, all your time and effort. So thank you very much for that. I am Vicky Bema. I am a high school science co-teacher as well as a special education teacher. I have worked in the district for 12 years, and I'm excited this year to help chaperone the Greece trip in April, and excited to have the opportunity to lead a trip to Costa Rica. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure. Rosie, are you able to unmute?
Thank you. Sorry. Hi, I'm Rosie Asian. I'll be traveling as a chaperone to Belize in a week, so I'm very excited to get that experience and insight into the entire process. And I'm excited to maybe lead another trip too.
We have the next slide, please. Thank you. So Rosie and I are really excited to offer students an opportunity to travel. We feel that it gives students a new way of learning and experiencing the world, that it provides them with some innovative hands-on skills. It opens students' eyes to the differences that exist in the world. Students have the ability to learn real-world curriculum, and we also feel like it sparks a passion in our students. Traveling helps students grow the skills we feel they should have when they graduate, like the Portrait of the Graduate skills that we know the district has really been working on. We feel that travel helps students align those skills also. When students return home, they have a lot of our social emotional curriculum that we're working on. They have a more of a growth mindset. They have more of a global perspective, and they have the experiences that they had on their trip that they can keep for a lifetime. In the words of Mark Twain, travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness.
So we chose Costa Rica as a destination for a few reasons. One is that Costa Rica is home to 20 national parks and about 5% of the world's biodiversity. There are cloud rainforests and coral reefs and dry forests to explore. This trip would fit in with our science curriculum as well. Almost every area of science that we study, in earth science, we study earth structures, and we would be taking a trip to a volcano in this trip. In biology, we study ecosystems and interactions of living things, and in this trip we'd explore through ziplining through a canopy of a rainforest, which is what I'm personally most excited about. And we would be doing some snorkeling also to observe aquatic ecosystems. In behavioral science, we study the interactions of animals, and Costa Rica is home to 500,000 species of animals. And Costa Rica has 30% of Costa Rica is protected by national forests and reserves. And of course, in environmental science, we study all aspects of the planet, including renewable resources. 98% of Costa Rica's energy is renewable, and 53% of the land is forested. So Costa Rica is has a nice the Costa Rica trip has a really nice alignment with our science curriculum. It also aligns with our social emotional curriculum because Costa Rica is known as one of the happiest places in the world. And then next slide, please. Thank you. These are some of the highlights of the trip that students would be experiencing.
What's included in our tour? The cost of our trip is just a little over $3,500, which is one of the lowest price points of a trip that we've been able to offer so far at the high school. So we're excited for that for families that might not be able to have afforded some of the other trips. The price includes our flights, most meals, entrance fees into any of the parks or exhibits that we're doing, transportation around Costa Rica and to the different things that we want to see. And it also provides us with a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week tour director for us. Things that the families might need to be responsible for are any passport or visa fees, baggage fees if we decide to check luggage, tips for local guides or bus drivers, whatever snacks or extra costs that students would like to incur. There might be a few lunches that aren't covered, and then transportation to and from Logan Airport. EF Tours offers some great fundraising for families who want to gain some extra money towards the trip. All students have a designated page where family and friends are able to go on and donate money for the students for their trip. They also allow private fundraising on the page. We as a school may offer some fundraising opportunities too to help cover some costs. And then EF Tours also offers some scholarships that students are able to apply for if they wish to.
We chose to travel with EF Tours because they're a tried and true company. They've worked with Franklin Public Schools for several tours at this point. They offer a global protection plan. Can you go to the next slide? Sorry. Thank you. They offer a global protection plan with emergency response teams that you're probably already familiar with, but I really like the fact that our tour guide will be with us the entire time and that they have a whole team that's experienced with the particular destination. For every destination, they have local people that are familiar with the area that can help make it safe for our kids. And I think one more switch. Yeah, there it is. EF Tours offers a free destination change as well if there's unforeseen circumstances within the world. So they would change the destination if we needed to have that happen. They also have a COVID protection plan where any student or chaperone that gets COVID, that becomes COVID positive can get home at no additional cost. And can you go to the next, I think one more after that. Thank you.
Perfect. And sorry, one more.
Oh,
yeah, sorry. And did you mention, Rosie, that chaperones, anyone affiliated with the trip, any adult and any chaperones through Franklin High School will have to go through a third-party background check, even beyond what Franklin Public Schools does. So I think that's a really important aspect also for the trip. For each traveler on our trip, yeah, sorry.
I missed that. Thanks, Vicki.
For each traveler on our trip, they offered the standard trip insurance policy, which covers lost baggage or property, any interruptions or cancellations, not through the fault of us, but through the fault of either the airlines or the trip company. If families are nervous about booking this far out, they can buy the Travel Protection Plus insurance for a little bit more, which gives them pretty much access to cancel the trip within 24 hours for almost any reason and recoup the money that they lost. We also have strict guidelines for payments and cancellation fees and what those allowances would cover. Parents would be made aware of those deadlines along with the amount of money that would be refunded or lost ahead of time. They would sign a contract with those dates so they'll be aware should anything happen along the way. And I think that's all we have for you tonight. If you have any questions, of course, we're willing to take any.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much. I'll open the floor to questions or comments. Start with Al Charles.
Sure, great. Thank you. Appreciate these presentations. Definitely informative and really great trip opportunities. One thing I think I saw was who's eligible for this trip to attend?
Anyone would be eligible, any student is eligible as long as they are in good conduct standing at the school.
So um it's not restricted to grades. So like in theory, a freshman in for next year could be eligible.
I'm not sure if incoming freshmen, I think we would have to speak, no, Mr.
That's a great
Peterson.
question. Mr. Charles is very key. He's onto something. So that's a great question that I'm sure others would have. It would have to be a student at Franklin High currently so that we know the students prior to signing up. So it'd have to be someone who is a freshman currently entering sophomore. So in essence, sophomores, juniors, and seniors would be on this trip, but it would have to be someone who's currently enrolled as a student at Franklin High School.
Cool. Thank you. I just want to make sure this is clear. And I know folks will be like, yeah, this is a great trip. Let me see what I can do. And just want to make sure we qualify the right folks. And I feel like these trips are great. My only concern is I feel like this is limiting the pool to be able to get access to these opportunities. I mean, we're talking about like with 30 kids, if it was just 2 grades, it's like 5%. So we're talking about less than 5% of our kids are eligible for these trips now. I would love to see what are we doing to make sure that we bring something similar and widen the net. It's just thinking like budget and everything. Like I feel like we're a lot of our students are now going to be like, well, I would love to do this, but I can't. And like, how do we care for them, and what do we give those that don't have the funds? So, if people have funds, great, and I support the trip. But I think we need to look at the other side as well and who's left. So I know it's not for you. It's just in general. I think we just need to start to think about that more. So because we have a lot of trips going on. I think Frank will be pretty much in every continent, I would say. we're going.
You bring up a good point. I think one thing that we've tried to do is by offering more and more opportunity, more and more students have the opportunity to attend in some ways. So the net, by offering multiple trips each year, you afford kids different opportunities. The vetting process is another thing I talk about. We continue to improve on how we do this. We pre-register students, get a sense of who's already going on a trip or has gone, and try to look at the dynamics of the student. Are they in good conduct before they even sign up, and try to work through and figure out those pieces. The last piece is the time piece. So you'll hear you've heard before, but you may hear in other presentations around basically the EF Tours puts together that funding page for students of time and not creating like a year in advance is to help families, is try to give them as much time as possible to raise money, participate in group fundraising. I know that there's limited scholarship opportunities that exist, I believe, but to your point, these are extracurricular trips, and we're trying to provide and offer things, but I know that it can be a challenge for students and for families as well. So,
thank you. Appreciate that. That's all I have for questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ruth Ann O'Sullivan.
I don't really have any questions. Just thank you for kind of, going above and beyond. And I know it's not the honeymoon vacation that you might otherwise go on, but I know the kids will make it fun for you. So just thanks. Thought it was a great presentation. Sounds like you guys will have a great time. I'd love to hear about it afterward.
All right. McNeil.
Thank you both for this presentation. I think it's always exciting that we offer these opportunities for our students, because exactly as you said, it's really is just wonderfully enriching experience to go out and see a different part of the world and see how how other people do life, but also to get the it's different educational aspects of it as well. So yeah, thank you for showing this to us, and I'll echo Al's sentiments as well. I would certainly encourage you to think and promote ways to help fundraise for students who don't have the means to afford this, because it'd be great to see if we can help expand that in any way we can. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron Gallagher.
No questions. Sounds like a great trip, though.
All right. And Griffith.
It sounds like a great trip. I was really excited to hear about the scientific bend to some of the different activities you'll be doing. So yeah, enjoy.
All right. Then seeing no other questions or comments, I will entertain a motion to recommend the approval of the request to take. Actually, I apologize, Lucas. Is this normally your shtick?
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
That's okay. I recommend approval of the request of Roseanne Aschenhausman and Vicky Bema to take students to Costa Rica from February 15th to February 22nd, 2025, as discussed.
All right. Didn't mean to steal your thunder.
That's okay.
All right. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, vote will come on the vote will come with roll call, starting with Al Charles,
Yes.
Ruth Ann O'Sullivan,
Yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Gallagher,
Yes.
Griffith,
Yes.
and Callahan, yes, as well, and passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. And then just again, kind of taking things a little out of order, we got discussion action item B, Italy field trip proposal.
Right. This is similar to the previous, so just know that it's an EF tour, and we're joined by Mr. Christopher Penza and Mr. Christopher Kelly, both teachers at Franklin High School in the history department, who are joining us. They have a similar presentation. I've also given them the permission to, if EF has some stock language for presentations, to kind of move ahead and get to the content of the Italy trip, but certainly you can ask any questions that you have. So Chris, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you to the school committee for inviting us to discuss our proposed trip to Southern Italy for February vacation 2025. Just by way of introduction, my name is Chris Kelly, and I'll provide a little bit more information about me and my background and my colleague Chris Penza as we get into our presentation. Thanks, Tina. If you go to the next slide. This is our table of contents. We'll go through an introduction, our background, the purpose of the trip, our itinerary. We want to talk about accessibility and then some concluding thoughts. Anything that our friends Rosie and Vicky Bema did a great job in discussing EF tours and what they provide and so forth. We'll leave that for a table discussion if you have any other further conversations about that. But we'll just kind of move through in the interest of time, just kind of move through the tour. So I've been a teacher of history at Franklin High School for 18 years. Right now I teach AP History and AP Psychology. I'm the National Honor Society co-advisor and a member of the Principals Educator Council. Prior to that, I think it's worth noting, especially as we're getting out of the building and heading over to travel abroad, that I spent 15 years in law enforcement and 4 years in the military prior to that. So I spent quite a bit of my time developing a set of skills that were centered around safety and security and responsibility. So I think that I bring that into the trip as parents think about sending their children abroad. Chris?
Hi, everybody. How are you doing? So my name is Chris Penza. I'm going into my 17th year at Franklin High School. I have chaperone trips down to DC for inaugurations. We've taken students up to various places to see presidential candidates speak. I've been an advisor in various different clubs, activities, yearbook, student government, class advisor, and I have a lot of experience working with kids. I have almost over 25 years of coaching experience. So we've gone on to many tournaments and all over the country. So I've been working with kids quite a bit.
One of the things that we always think about and talk about and teach in the history department is how all history is local. And one of the things that we were thinking about when we were organizing this tour was the rich cultural background that in the town of Franklin that finds its roots back in Italy, particularly southern Italy. So we wanted to expand that into an opportunity to give students the opportunity to explore the collection of cultural artifacts in Rome and several other historically significant towns that I'll talk to you about a little bit later throughout southern Italy. One of the things that I think this tour does a really nice job of is aligning itself not just with our history standards and the portrait of a graduate, but also with the mission or the vision statement of the school committee, which kind of sets this off by helping us help students to become and achieve success as global citizens. And I think that when we take that and expand that into the history standards, at the high school, we talk about extending student knowledge of historical events and world cultures. And then if we expand that even further into the portrait of a graduate, we can align that with the application of that historical knowledge into student lives and into the community. So I think it aligns itself in a number of places that make the trip both valuable and important. Here you can move on to the next slide, please. I won't get into EF Tours many longer than I need to, unless you have some questions about what they do, their background, and some of the policies that they have. Next slide. Here's a quick view of our itinerary. We'll be flying into Rome. Then we'll travel south into Benevento, further south into Matera, and then we'll go up north just above the heel into Bari for 3 days and some surrounding towns there before we fly back to Rome to head home. So this is a day-by-day itinerary. We'll come into Rome on our first day and spend some time there. We'll be looking at the Trevi Fountain and spend some time looking at some of the cultural artifacts there, the antiquities, the Spanish Steps. On the third day, we're going to take a guided tour of Vatican City, which should be really exciting, including the Sistine Chapel. We're going to travel about 3 hours by motor coach to Benevento to take a look at the ruins of a Roman theater there. There's a gladiator museum that I think students will find really interesting. There's a lot of ancient relics there. From there, we'll travel a couple of hours again by motor coach to Matera. To see one of the world's oldest populated towns. And the thing that's really great about this is it's not just an examination of ancient Roman culture, but it's also an examination of Paleolithic culture. There's cave dwellings and fossils from the Paleolithic age over 2 million years old that students will be able to have access to. And then we're going to head to Matera. From Matera to Bari, and this is on the Adriatic Sea. It's a coastal port, and we'll be taking a look at what I think is going to be really interesting, the Casa Grata Vico Solitario. It's just a town that is built into the side of a mountain that's been recreated as a museum, and a lot of the relics there and the homes there look just as they were when a group called the Sassi people lived there as recently as 1954. So I love the spread of the examination of culture that the tour is providing us. And then from there, we'll head to Ostani and take a look at some of the rural life through some of the farming districts and look at some of the oldest olive groves that are producing olives. So it's a nice examination of not only city life, but rural life as well. Next slide. We're going to tour on our last day. We'll take a look at some other ancient dwellings in a place called Castellana. And then on our last day, we'll come back to Bari by motor coach and then fly to Rome. We'll spend some more time taking a guided tour of the Theater of Marcellus and the Forum and the Colosseum. And I think students will find that particularly interesting, particularly the area where the gladiators prepared for their matches is still part of the museum there that they can see. And then on our last day, we're going to head from Rome back here home. Next slide, please. Here's the cost of our tour. It's $4,119, and that includes everything that Vicki and Rosie mentioned that EF Tours provides. round trip airfare, hotels and private bathrooms, breakfast and dinner, as well as our daily activities. They also offer the Global Protection Plan. There's also a Rome cooking class, which I'm very excited about. You can pre-book that as well. So the total cost for students is $4,409, which EF Tours breaks into $393 a month for 11 months. This is accessibility is something that we were just discussing, and I think you raised some very good points about making these tours accessible to students with limited incomes. And just as Rosie and Vicky mentioned, that there is a global scholarship, and there is the fundraising opportunity. And I think one of the things that Lucas mentioned that it's particularly relevant is that advertising these tours, and with your approval, we plan to start advertising this tour tomorrow. That gives students the opportunity to engage in some fundraising opportunities that can help them meet their cover the cost of the trip. The other piece of accessibility that I wanted to mention, I think is important, is that while we will make every possible accommodation for students with disabilities, access to a lot of these sites, particularly in Italy, which is very hilly and mountainous in some areas, some of the access to the sites will require walking over long distances, up and down steep and uneven terrain. So that's just a caveat that it might not be suitable for all students. So I just wanted to make sure that that was we had understanding about that. So in conclusion, our tour will provide students an opportunity to engage with European history at the center of its founding. They'll gain a keen understanding of the importance of political, civic, and cultural engagement as a cornerstone to a healthy and thriving society and a democracy. I think that's particularly important now in today's cultural and political climate. And that we also will give students the opportunity to apply that knowledge and experience in ways that help them become engaged and civic-minded members of a democratic society. So if you have, I'd like to entertain any questions that you might have for Chris or I, if you have them.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much. I'll open the floor. Al Charles?
No questions here. Thank you.
O'Sullivan?
I just wanted to ask, when the kids are fundraising, like how does it work? Do they put when it's chosen? I think it's a raffle, right? Like a lottery, depending on how many kids want to go. And then, do they need like a down payment right away, or do they fundraise for the year ahead of time? What's the timing look like for that commitment?
I can just start, Chris, if you'd like.
Okay, I'll let you go. I'll let you go first.
Okay, so basically, they get basically like a GoFundMe for the trip through EF, and each kid has the opportunity to set that up. They then can put that out to all their family members, and they can fundraise and ask people to do things. They can come up with projects, and I know that there are some times where the advisors have worked to put together fundraising. So if you participate in this group fundraising opportunity, we'll sell something that at the school, for example. And if you participate and, take a time at the table or whatnot, we'll divide out the proceeds among the students. We had that happen for one of our trips that's coming up, and students participated, and you divide that out. The fundraising is an application through EF that they can submit, and it's up to EF to award to award the funding as that goes. And then Chris, I'll let you fill in the blanks that I might have missed.
Mr. Kelly, would you like me to go in, or would you like to go? Mr.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I think in clarification with your question, Ms. O'Sullivan, you were speaking about, how do students get selected? Is it a first come, first serve? Ultimately, we will have a meeting and we'll field the kind of the interest, and people will sign into a Google form. We're trying to kind of clean up the processes of make sure we have conversations with students and parents before they put any money down for deposits. But ultimately, it is kind of a first come, first serve. And we're going to cap it at 60 students. That fills us our 2 buses. And then it's a 6-to-1 chaperone to student ratio. So with this, if we get to the 60 students, that'll be the chaperones will fill up the 2 buses. So the ballpark of the students, it is first come, first serve. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think what I was kind of trying to get to too is, so can a kid who doesn't have the money sign up and then work that year to fundraise?
Yeah.
So they don't.
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely. So there's the $1,000 scholarship they can earn from EF, which is it is merit based, but they give away over $100,000 in scholarships. So there's an opportunity there to earn $1,000, and then the payment plan does help chunk it into smaller and manageable chunks, and then myself, Mr. Kelly, will be working together with the students to run fundraisers with local establishments, whether it's Panera or Chipotle, to kind of do like a receipt night. And we'll try to do as many of those as we can so that we can kind of divvy up the funds evenly. And then working with student government and or any other clubs and activities that might have some funding that they might be willing to do towards almost like a scholarship for students.
Yeah, and I know that high school kids, once they're 14 years old, they can work. And so it does feel like, knowing that they've got a year to kind of get that. When you broke it down monthly, I said, oh, okay, then it gives a kid. I was a kid who was like that. I remember kids in Natick High School going to Spain, and I was like, oh, I want to go. And I could have, worked hard at, whatever little job I was doing at the time. But that's just good to know. I just, real quick, sorry, I don't want to keep going, but is this the Mr. Kelly, Lucas, and that was spoken of yesterday? We did this portrait of a graduate workshop yesterday, and the student representatives who were there were just gushing over you, Mr. Kelly. So I was curious.
I wasn't going to tell him.
I'll take credit for it if it wasn't.
A lot of it was about like, the what you get from the above and beyond, kind of outside the just ordinary curriculum that, so how it benefits, these kids. So, all of you who are going above and beyond and coaching and doing all these things, thank you, because you've certainly made
very nice to hear. It's very nice to hear. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. That's all.
Thank you. McNeil?
No questions, but yeah, thank you very much for this presentation. Looks like a really exciting trip. And again, to Ruth Ann's point, definitely encourage you and ask you to please get creative and expand all possible fundraising opportunities and to give assistance to those students who might not otherwise be able to attend. So thank you again.
Thank you. Erin?
Sorry. Yeah, just one question. I saw on the tour price slide that the trip departs from the New York area. I was just wondering if there's plans for, the kids to travel down together, or if you're actually heading from Logan, but just was wondering about that.
Would you like me to get that, Mr. Kelly?
Please.
So Ultimate EF Tours, they find the best rates, they find the best travel plan for us. And if we end up flying out of New York, they come to Franklin with buses and they ship us all together down. It's all built into the cost. So they if in fact we end up going down to New York, they'll provide the buses. We all get on the buses and then we go down together.
Awesome. Sounds like a great trip.
Thank you. And Paul?
No questions for me. Sounds like a fun time.
All right, wonderful. Lucas?
Okay. I recommend approval of the request of Chris Penza and Christopher Kelly to take FHS students to Italy from February 14th through February 23rd, 2025, as discussed.
All right. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Questions, comments? Seeing none, roll call. Al Charles?
Yes.
Ruth Ann O'Sullivan?
Yes.
Dave McNeil?
Yes.
Erin Gallagher?
Yes.
Paul Griffith?
Yes.
And Dave Callahan, yes, as well. Motion passes. Thank you both very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So then now we'll actually kind of go back to just the regular order of the agenda. if that works with all, back to we kind of left off with guest presentations. Now C, budget overview.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. As I'll cue this. Tina, are you pulling this up or do you want me to? You're doing it? Okay.
I can do it for.
Okay. So we have a budget update. As you know, with our timing, in March will be the superintendent's recommended budget will come before you. Well, then the second meeting in March will be the budget hearing. What we are trying to do this year, as you know, through the workshop that we conducted in January and the budget development process we've undergone, we're trying to bring you all along as well as the community, kind of where we're at. And this is an attempt to just provide information and bring people along. So as we move forward, our purpose is just to provide an overview and discuss the process we've undertaken and get to a little more clarity on where we are with FY25. And just to kind of spoiler alert, it's a challenging year. And when we look at it and what we need to do to provide the level of service that we expect and the community expects, it will take funding. And I want to talk through that in more detail as we go. So moving on, as you've seen through the trips, we tried to build a budget, which we believe is a moral document on what we value and what we want for our students. Ultimately link it back to the portrait of a graduate. When kids walk across that stage, have we provided the education and the resources and supports for them to be confident and self-aware and curious and reflective and be able to navigate a world where they're going to need to problem solve. They're going to need to adjust and adapt. And we hope that we've provided them with the skills they need to be able to do that in an effective way. All right, moving on. Bob, there you go, Bob.
Yep. Good evening. So we just wanted to provide you some context and some few facts and figures just so that you realize the scope of what we're working with. As you know, Franklin Public Schools has 10 physical buildings. There are 494 teachers, full-time equivalent. You'll see 1,234 employees. That's all employees. Got almost 500 teachers, 300 paraprofessionals. We've got administrators, and then lots of other support personnel. So that's everybody who has any connection to the Franklin Public Schools that's counted in that number. Earlier in our budget workshop, you saw that the total state aid, which is called Chapter 70 for FY25, is $29.4 million or $29.5 million. And we had spent in FY23 $14,697 per pupil. Next slide. Just so you can see how we've progressed to where we are today. Way back in October, we laid out the guidelines through the superintendent's vision and created budget forms, sent that off to principals and cost center heads, department heads. There was a budget kickoff where we discussed just the vision that the superintendent had as it related to the budget and making sure that the budget represents what we value. Met with each cost center as they submitted their budget request, asked for clarifications, asked for validation as to why those requests were important. And then the superintendent and I worked with the other central office team members to develop the budget request. We had a budget workshop, which you were all part of, where we provided, again, a lot of overview and a lot of valuable information from principals and other folks who have responsibility for cost centers. And that brings us to where we are tonight, providing you with a budget overview, which will really give you a big picture view of where we are and what we see moving forward and what the challenges are.
So just how does the budget impact our students? Our goal, obviously, we're a human industry. So we have adults that are working with students to educate. That's the business we're in. So the largest percentage of our budget is salaries. So what we really try to build a foundation upon is looking at a student to teacher ratio that falls within a guideline that allows us to educate kids. And ultimately, we're trying to recruit and retain the most talented faculty we can so that they can do the job of educating our students. And we're fortunate in Franklin to have many, many, many talented leaders and teachers and faculty within the district. But as we continue to go through our budget cycles, it gets increasingly challenging, and we'll hit on that a little bit later. Ultimately, not only is it about class size, but we're also trying to target supports for kids. You've heard us talk about interventionists. You've heard us talk about individualized supports for students. So intervention for all, anyone who needs it, that could be academic or behavioral, but also students who require additional supports or additional individualized educational supports. Those are all factored into how all impact a budget, and ultimately can positively impact a kid if you have the right resources and the right amount to do it. Finally, it wouldn't be a school if we didn't offer a robust offering of co-curricular activities that are inclusive of all kids, whether you're into music, theater, athletics, clubs, all of those things we value and we feel are important, and they're part of that bigger picture. And finally, we have to keep up with the needs, the technology needs, the material needs that we have across the board, and ultimately other resources like counselors and counseling support. So those are some of the major impacts that we have. And when we think about what we've done thus far, just to bring you through, what we've had to do is basically take the FY24 budget, consider factors such as what are our contractual obligations, right? That includes contractual increases of salaries for all staff across the district, looking at our special education programming and services, healthcare costs, looking at variable costs such as substitute teachers, transportation, those pieces, and then obviously look at the changes to revenue, whether it's through grants or our revolving accounts. Last year, you may recall, we had to spend down those revolving accounts to continue to move a budget forward that we could sustain. So we can move forward on that. So our priorities, we've met with our leadership team. We had that workshop, but prior to that, we've met continually, as Bob already mentioned. Trying to have class sizes within those recommendations is a foundation of how we're building our budget. I told you about student supports already. We're also trying to further advance our literacy, pre-K through 12, other curriculum initiatives where we are an academic institution. Teaching and learning is what we're all hired. It's why we have these jobs. So you pair the right class sizes with high quality teaching and high quality curriculum resources. That's how you build a solid educational program. It's also important to note that we have to review and have reviewed the ESSER grants. The ESSER 3 is going away, so we will no longer have ESSER grant funding available to us. So that means we have to migrate or reduce the items that are in there, and we get into that in more detail. And ultimately, I talked about high quality learning and trying to close gaps for students, but ultimately try to invest in new ways in which we can try to build a solid system that Franklin has had a reputation for and wants to continue. It just is going to take us to reinvest in our system if we're going to do that successfully.
So we're going to focus primarily on the idea of a level service budget, although you'll see some other options as well. But we feel as though a level service budget is the bare minimum that we want to move forward with. So we wanted to define what that level service budget represents. It is basically assuming that we have the same level of service next year that we have this year. So that includes all of the current school programs, staff levels, class sizes, all the things that we offer to our students will be continued. That base budget includes what we started with, or for an FY24 budget. We then add in the statutory or regulatory mandates. A lot of those are special ed, but others come from DESE in relation to tiered focused monitoring, and other types of audits that they do. Our bargaining increases, as well as step, longevity, and lane changes. And then we have other contracts, health insurance, our transportation contract, those also escalate over time. So we've got to make assumptions as they relate to those costs. Next slide, please. So this slide that you're seeing here is a description of what that level service budget looks like financially. So we start with the final FY24 budget that was approved back in June of 2023, approximately $72 million. And the proposed FY25 budget at level service, taking into consideration all of the things mentioned in the previous slide, bring us to about $79.3 million, which represents an increase of $7.3 million over last year's recommended and approved budget. That is an increase of 10.19%. Next slide. So here you'll see some of the obligations that are part of those assumptions and the dollar values for each of those. The contractual obligations are $1.7 million. We had almost $500,000 of salaries attributed to ESSER 3 funds that are positions that are still needed moving forward. So those are positions and funds that would need to be assumed in the FY25 budget. There is an anticipation of increased out-of-district special ed costs and services of about $2.2 million. Special ed transportation, we're anticipating going up $100,000. Our homeless student transportation has been very minimal historically. This year already, we're close to $80,000. And a lot of that is due to students who are moving to other shelters, and we're still responsible for transporting them either to their new community. Usually it's a cost split, but there's still a responsibility for us. So we're seeing that, and we anticipate that to continue next year. Our costs for transporting our own in-district students, whether it's through our own drivers or through a contracted service, that's going up as well. We were notified that health insurance will go up 9.5% next year, so that represents $650,000. And we're anticipating a decrease in some grant funding, and we've already talked about the decrease in the significant contribution that we've made with revolving funds in this year's budget, and that not being sustainable to a total amount of $1.2 million for those two items combined. So you can see a grand total there of $6.5 million without any other additions, considerations, anything else additional into the budget. Next slide, please.
As we move forward, you'll see the next few slides just break down general education, special education. And ultimately, just to be clear, general education just makes up the programs and services that all students benefit from across the district. And it's your core teaching staff in classrooms. This includes, nurses, guidance counselors, administrators, instructional materials, and supplies. All the things that we associate with school in the broader context is what's included in the general education. So if you move to the next slide, Tina, you'll see how this is broken down. Basically, it just breaks it down. It shows you the FY24 to 25 proposed and the percentage increases in those areas. The cost of doing business across all industries, it continues to increase. And you see that reflected here as well. And these are all the areas that apply to all for general education. If we move to...
Before you move to the next slide, just preemptively, I'll answer a question that I imagine will be coming. When you look at the increase in athletics to 36%, that's more an accounting issue than a real increase. Previously, coaching salaries were included in teachers and specialists up here in this salary line item. And we've categorized them where I think they belong in athletics. So we get a true picture of what it costs to run the athletic program. So that's why you're seeing that increase there, and a less than 4% increase in teachers and specialists when we know what the cost of living increase was for those. So hopefully that answers what might have been a question moving forward.
Thank you for saying that, Bob. Also, does that include transportation specifically related to athletics?
It does. And we, again, historically, transportation was in the transportation line item where it didn't really belong because it's a cost specifically related to athletics, not to all programs. So we've incorporated transportation in that line item as well now.
Thank you. Next, we have special education, and this area, and I know Mrs. Morano's on the call as well, but ultimately of all of our departments, this is where all districts experience the most fluctuation. If you remember last year, OSD came down and said there'd be a 14% increase to our budget. Do you remember that? So these are areas where, private schools are able to, basically set their increases. And then if we have students enrolled in them, this is where we would send our students that we either can't provide for the needs of those specific students, or we've created in-district programming to support kids that we have in town to the degree that we can. But there are times where we need students to get the appropriate education they deserve. So that's how that works. And when those increases come, that's what creates some of that fluctuation. And that also through that, yep, this is fine. Put this, you can put that slide up. Go back. The other way. Great. You can go one more. Thank you. And you'll see the breakdown in the percentage increases in these areas. Some of the increases you'll notice from our ESSER funding, we had to incorporate into our budget. So we had counselors living in the ESSER 3 budget line that now get migrated into the request line, and what that will be in the proposal line for counselors, for example. That's an area. Okay, next. So here's the budget reality that we're faced with. Overall, since FY29, if you average out the percentage increases, it's averaged out to 2.9. We've been in that range, and basically, what we're sharing tonight is a level service budget, meaning carrying forth, as Dr. Dutch mentioned, the services we have today would be a 10.19%, which is more than we've asked. We've been in communication with our town administrator. We've had productive conversations around the budget development process and kind of where we move from here. But we just want to make it very clear to this committee and our community that anything less than that would require reductions. So we just modeled out, just based off of FY24, if you were to put in a different increase, whether it was 2.5, 3.5, 4, these are the numbers. And then if you look at the column to the right, that's the deficit. So want to make that clear. I think this is will be, obviously this will be a public document that we share out, but wanted to just share a reality around the idea of what we're faced with within our budget. So if you could move to the next slide, Tina, to just talk about impacts. If we ended up having to reduce, we'd be looking at impacts that include larger class sizes. We would need to reflect on our fee structure and look at our fees. We would also have to look at our programming and look to see whether or not we could sustain the level of programming that we either offer or we'd have to re-envision. So if you go to the next slide, I've included 3 more. We would have to look at, we've already experienced extracurricular activities being impacted, but just trying to lay a reality in order for us to do business. And we know that there's not enough funding in town to support that level of an increase. So we would look to eliminate things in order to make that meet. We don't want to be in that position. I will say the continued cuts certainly creates an atmosphere of uncertainty for our educators as we look to retain. And then on the flip side of that, recruitment. When you have a volatile system where you make cuts or you have to make cuts and then try to hire folks back, I think we find ourselves in these positions where in the long term, it's understandable in difficult budget years. But if you sustain that model and that type of way in which you get to field your team for the following year, I think it creates a bit of volatility. So I just want to put that out there as some impacts that we would have to that. If you move to the next slide. Beyond level service, which is more than what we talked about. In order to stabilize and partially restore, we would look to include in one budget model, which I'll get to. I have 4 of them. Try to bring back and add specific targeted positions that would allow us to get back to this idea of stabilizing. And I've broken it down into 4 ways, but basically survival is level service. If we carry forth today what we're doing and we do it next year, to me, that's survival. That does not include bringing back middle school clubs and activities. That just means we do what we did today and it's survival. If we were to do something beyond survival and create more of a stabilization, it would mean incorporating things that we've previously cut and partially restoring some of the positions and programs that we've had. These are just some of the examples of some of the asks that we've had across the way. The librarian at the high school, that's a NEASC requirement. Not having a librarian at your high school puts you in violation of your accreditation. That's an example. You'll notice other positions, kindergarten, I would just use the example of we are sometimes faced with really difficult circumstances when we have 2 sections of kindergarten. And we know going in, they're already at 24. Let's just say 2 teachers. If you add a third, if you can't afford it, you've now decreased that number down to 17. But often what we find is if we don't have the funding to provide at least a level service budget, we'll end up in these cycles of higher class sizes and having to make adjustments. And that's not a place that we want to be in. I think everyone's working really hard in the district to provide the best education we can for kids, but it's difficult when we don't have the starting with class size, but then building off of that, the supports and resources. So if you move to the next slide, this includes in the stabilize, partially restore, it includes middle school after school clubs. It includes some of the equipment and supplies that we've either deferred or not had. It includes the transition programmings at our middle school and our after school behavioral support. So those are just a few items that are part of a partially restore. If you move to the next slide, we've talked to, let's see. So these are not included in that number. If you look here, there's a variety of positions that teachers, our principals advocated for to try to bring back. In this particular number, this falls to me, and if we want to get back into the right place we need to be, I thought it was most transparent if we were to try to break this up into a few different models to show what's included. We'll continue to dive into this and provide more detail, but in order to get to thriving, that's where you start to look at, for example, this is an example I hear a lot. We cut world languages at the elementary level. It's very difficult for me as superintendent to say in one conversation to bring back elementary world language if we have class sizes in K at 25. So it's like we have to differentiate this out and say, look, if we want to do level service, here's where we're at. If we want to do level service and partially restore, this is the number. And then if we want to do more and bring back things that we've lost along the way that we've talked about and I've been a part of as someone who's been in this community for over 20 years, this is like a Thrive model. So if you move to the next slide, I call this the tale of four budgets as a way to just model out kind of where we're at and what we're looking at. These are not, if you look at the bottom, this is not the superintendent's proposal for a budget, but I'm modeling out for everyone so that we have context to what's included, what's not, and this is going to be refined even more. But ultimately, less than level service is cuts and reductions. A survive model at 10.19% is to maintain the current services we offer. A level service plus, if you will, is a 12.92% at this time. And that brings back some pieces that we recently cut in order to stabilize. And then if we're looking to get into more of a Thrive conversation, you're looking at a 16% increase. I've noticed that other districts are starting to put out their numbers as well. We are not out of bounds with what I'm seeing others need to do this year as well. So I share that all with just to provide as much clarity as possible. And I'm prepared to present with even further detail when we get to the superintendent's proposed budget, but we're open to questions, feedback, input, which can help inform us as we move forward. We need to continue to also communicate with, partner with the town and talk through this process, the funding. And we know there's only so much funding to go around, but we need to do our part to advocate for schools and really clearly outline what we need. So I'll stop there. And Bob, if you have any final comments, other than that, we'll kick it over to Dave.
I have a lot to kind of say on the subject, but I won't. I'll kick it off to my colleagues first, though. With a quick thank you for all the work that went into this. The fact alone that we just have we got developed 4 budgets for the committee, more importantly for the whole community to be able to see, to look at the numbers and to start seeing the realities that we've been talking about for many years, but that is, what was on the horizon is now kind of directly in front of us. But Charles, I'll hand it off to you first. If you have any questions, comments.
Great, thank you. So one, appreciate this visibility and transparency. I feel like this is what we need, and just getting this out sooner than we've done in the past has been paramount. I feel like this will at least drive some conversation and really understand, okay, what do we need to do, and where do we see ourselves as a community, and what do we want from our students? So this has been huge. It's just hearing the numbers, it's kind of shocking as we're just running and doing some math as you were speaking. And just from a level services just to survive, as you said, it's 7.3 million to increase, with 6.5 million of that are just obligations to begin with. So nearly 90%, 89% of the increase is obligations, and it's not even for services. So there's a lot of things that need to be done to just run a school system, and it comes at a cost. So I appreciate you highlighting that and sharing that. I think people need to understand we have to make sure that there are people to support the students to do the work, and there's a cost. Can we go back to slide 11 though, real quick? Couple things, and I'm hoping if we can change this for going forward. It was, if you both slides 11, I believe 13 and maybe 15. Actually, no, sorry, not 11. Slide 13 was the one. Apologize. So when we talk about the proposals, and and thank you, Dr. Dutch, for jumping in with the athletics in terms of the percentage increase. But one thing I would love to do, just to make it easy so folks don't have to do the math, is can we just have the dollar increase? Because while we can say something is a 5% increase for one category, 5% doesn't mean the same for another. And it could be 3% for another category, but that's a higher total dollar amount. So I want folks just to jump into the percentage increase, because it's not really comparing apples to apples at the end of the day.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Yeah, so I think it's like that 13 and 15 both. I think if we can do that, that would be great. Because yeah, just looking at it, like your eyes always go to the biggest number. I mean, it jumped down to 29.92% for supplies, but that's really only what, a $26,000 increase. You know, in comparison, it's a small increase compared to the other stuff that are a lower percentage. One thing that jumped out, so you mentioned the increase, the need for a librarian. So right now we don't have a librarian in the high school. And you said if we don't have one, ultimately we could lose accreditation. Like, I guess, where are we in that state? Like,
Good question.
Librarian.
Yeah. So we don't have one now. We have to complete our 5-year report, and they will cite us and say you need to, in order to keep your accreditation, you need to have a librarian. When push came to shove last year, we did ask for a librarian early on in the budget process, but as we saw the tea leaves and we saw the budget develop the way it did, it was not a position. It was cut, the library, or not restore or further reduce teaching positions. So we made a decision. So we go into what's called like a warning category. By the time we have our decennial visit, which had been deferred since I've returned, I believe it's 2026, but I need to double check that. Basically, we would need to have that librarian in place prior to that visit for sure. But ultimately, we'll be put into basically like it'll be a citing that we don't have the librarian. And it's not just, that's the compliance factor. Not having a school librarian, I think if provided the opportunity, what a school librarian does for a high school or any school, I should say, they provide a tremendous amount of support and educational opportunities for students to kind of equip kids with the books they need, how to research, and just really create that culture of learning and reading. So there's many pieces to this that I would advocate for, but ultimately we were just sticking to compliance driven in this particular budget because it's kind of the state we're in at this point. But yes, so that's the deal. We'd go into warning, but we would need to have one in order to be accredited by the time they visit.
Okay. Do we have like a rough timeline?
I will double check because I believe the visit was deferred when the new high school was built. So what I need to check in, I was there when the new high school was built. I left for a period of time, and now I'm sitting at a school committee meeting going, wait a minute, did we defer because it's 10, but I have to double check just to confirm. And I will get that number. I'll get that date to you.
And just for the public, I guess, if we lose the accreditation at the high school, what does that mean for the students at the high school?
The NEASC accreditation is basically it's a high school accreditation that as students apply to colleges, it's basically saying it's like the version of our institution's auditing. Do you have high-level teachers teaching? Do you have high-quality instructional materials? Are the students learning? So if you've participated in a visit, it's a multi-day visit. They review curriculum. They look at assessments. They observe teachers. They shadow students throughout the day to learn about their experiences. And at the end of it, they provide a report that provides you with recommendations, commendations, and areas that are needing to be addressed more immediately. So you do this in order to stay accredited. And in a high school with an NEASC accreditation is where you want to be. I don't know of any currently that are not NEASC accredited in Massachusetts.
Okay. So
it could be, but I don't know. But
not necessarily a good look, at least for colleges that are like, oh, what school do you go to? And why does this not want to have accreditation in comparison to all the other high schools in Massachusetts?
Correct. And I think correct. Yeah.
I think I'm good for now, but I may have other stuff. Dave, bear with me.
No, absolutely. I think this is going to be one where we'll probably go up and down the line a few times. So, but then we'll go Ruth Ann O'Sullivan.
Thank you. This is, I expected this. I've been really plugged into the budget conversation before school committee. So I know it's not easy to create the pressure on you. I know it was immense to come up with a number. The pressure on us to get a number from you was intense. So we were trying to kind of offer you that grace to like get with your administrators.
Thank you.
I just, I more want to just kind of get on my soapbox just a bit, because it's been 16 years of being capped at 2.5%, and we always don't even get 2.5%. So, as a school committee, we're going to be discussing an override with the town council, bringing forward a number for an override for the town to vote on. Human capital is the number one asset of any organization. I say that every week, I feel like, when I talk in school committee, but I just want to tell a quick story, because I did hear, as a parent of a kid in the music program, I heard about losing our chorus teacher last year, and it was a real sort of reckoning with parents to kind of be alerted. And what parents don't always understand is when you get when you negotiate with the union and you have to let these teachers know by a certain date that they may or may not be back because it's not in the budget, and then you do get a little extra, they have already signed with other districts. And so I know that our chorus teacher signed with Wachusett, because that's like where my parents live out in Rutland, Mass. So I sort of follow that story pretty closely to see what happened there. And things like that they affect our tenure, they affect the culture of the school. I'm glad in this you're using words like required and not wanting this money. It's like, this is what's required. You guys know what's required. We have a democratically elected 7 board member here that looks and does these workshops with you guys and looks at this and hires our superintendent, and we QC this budget, and so we can't get any more granular than we do. So that's the fact that this is just level, which is bare minimum. The town needs to understand, when you're dealing with a bare minimum budget, it creates infighting in the schools. It creates, teachers saying, hey, they're getting this computer, or they're getting this resource, or why do our supply budget get cut? And it doesn't matter if we give these teachers a little extra raise, because it's like the culture of the school is disintegrating and eroding. So I know we're all going to go to bat for you. I'm sure we are. One other thing I just wanted to mention, because I see some members of the finance committee on here, is that I did hear a couple of months ago, the chair of the finance committee is friendly with one of the finance committee members over in Milford. And he said, why does Milford get more money than us from the state? Because Milford's got I think 6,000 person less population. We're about 6,000 people more here in Franklin. And the answer to that is Milford's land value and median income is a lot lower than Franklin's. So the state looks at Milford and says they need it, and Franklin doesn't. So I saw Jeff Roy last night. He was at a meeting I was at, and he gets us quite a bit more than we are even supposed to be afforded from the state. So I really hope that everybody who's sort of watching this on television or listening to this comes to, I know that, what's the date? March 6th is the next sort of joint budget subcommittee meeting. So that takes a few members from finance committee, a few members from town council, and a few members from school committee, puts them all together to try to figure out how to make this budget work for the town. And we don't hold the purse strings. The school committee, we can't give more money to the schools. We can only show up and talk at town council and show up in the community and advocate and try to get people to show up. And it's really going to take a community effort, reaching out to our town leadership to say, this is what we want. So sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now. I'm sure there's a lot more questions people might have, but it's just, this is heartbreaking. And I really, really hope, Franklin, to say that we don't even have it, we might lose our accreditation at the library when we are the home of the first library. It's just, it's sad, and it's no good for our reputation, and it's not good for our students. So thank you for doing so much with so little. I really hope the town steps up. I'll be pushing helping that charge. So thank you.
Thank you. Just to add to that, Ruth Ann, we have been engaging Dr. Dutch and I and Dr. Rogers and Mrs. Morano in a collaborative effort with the town leadership to try to suss this out and make sense. I think it's been a collaborative effort to try to move this along. So right now we're just trying to lay out the reality, and ultimately the next meeting we need to come with a recommendation, a superintendent's recommendation for what we want to move forward with. But there's more communication that needs to occur. But I just wanted to put that out there to you, just so that and the community, so that there's an awareness of wanting to get to a common goal around this. So.
I know I have the privilege of being on school committee and kind of being in touch with you all. And I know on top of everything you're doing to run the district while you're completely under-resourced, you are trying to put together 4 budgets and have these collaborative meetings. So thank you. You know, you're doing God's work. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Dave McNeil.
Yeah, wow. First off, I want to thank you, Lucas and Bob, for all the work that you did on this. It's hard work and definitely not easy, though I'm not feeling particularly thankful for the information itself, but the work. Yeah, thank you. It's I'm taking a look at all this. It's horrifying. It really is. This outlook. It's the word that comes to mind. I'd like to ask you to expand upon, because I think it's really important to hit home on this, in the potential impacts on the district in slides 17 and 18. And this was something that when we had the budget workshop a couple weeks ago that was mentioned in one of the earlier slides. This was something that really stuck out to me, two somethings actually. That the different building principals and admin kept bringing up over and over and over again. It seemed like really strong themes in terms of the reduction in staff and just how fundamental the student to teacher ratios are to maintaining, and how we're just kind of looking on this in danger of not being able to maintain those like we want to. And then the culture of volatility as well, with not being able to hire and retain educators that we want to, the impact on that. So would you mind expanding on those two things? Because they were 2 strong themes that really stuck out to me in that workshop.
Yes. So we were limited on who we could hire. We had to cap and look at, who we could afford to bring in. That's not a good strategy in general. I mean, everyone has to do some layer of that, but ultimately the way the budget, I'll speak to last year. The way we navigated the budget and ended up with the shortfall and had to make reductions put us in a position where we were cutting, letting teachers know the timing of that. I think the teachers themselves went and said, look, I've been laid off. I need to now find employment. I have a family. I need to do what I have to do. So they interview and they get another job. And then when we, I'm thankful we received more money, but I would just say the impact of not making one set of cuts and just living with where we were. It's good that we were able to have that to try to bring back and restore positions, but we spent the majority of our time trying to re-recruit either people we cut or then get out and post and try to find people to come in. So I guess that's retaining and recruiting. And that's a cycle that erodes over time. And I think what I don't want us to develop is a reputation of Franklin makes their cuts very late in the season. Some budgets are resolved because they have, their timeline is different. So they do it earlier. Maybe by April, they know kind of where they stand and what they're doing. And they make their reductions. And if something changes, they're able to then, when we're about the time we're laying off, it's like, ooh, you know what? We figured out a way. We can hire another K teacher, so they bring them on board. So that's one piece. But the volatility piece is just around in this cycle of cuts and restorations or just straight up cuts. I think what happens is if you're a new teacher or someone who's non-tenured and you're going, I want to come to Franklin, but if I've been paying attention the last few years, I can recall a time when there was a large layoff that made the news. Then after that, there's been a series of layoffs that happened in the spring. So the cycle of our budget development and what we do definitely puts us, it has an impact. And the piece I would mention too is when you have less people doing the work, more falls on everyone else. So, you know, we've experienced that as well. So sometimes we have positions posted that we can't hire for because we can't find qualified candidates. That means somebody else needs to pick up those pieces. We've experienced that with some administrative positions more recently, but ultimately, I think that has a ripple effect across the district as well. So the story that Ruth Ann told, what that was all related to seniority and bumping rights. It wasn't a choice to like eliminate a program at the middle level, but the impact was that. And then to try to, after the fact, try to go and bring back and make the system whole again, we end up in this really difficult place. And the time I want to be spending planning and working towards, you know, the next stage, we spend our spring in this kind of turbulent cycle of trying to just navigate the budget season. And then what ends up happening is without a healthy budget, we spend our summer just picking away and trying. You've seen me give the updates of who we have left to hire. We do our best to hire as many qualified people as possible before we even kick off in July, but that's just not possible sometimes. So all of it has an impact, and it's time we're spending then. So I appreciate you bringing up these points, and I welcome anyone on my team if I missed anything to share, but I appreciate you bringing that up, Dave.
Just one piece to add to this. While, you know, there are often open positions throughout the region and people are able to find jobs who have been laid off, unfortunately for us, when we're ready to call them back, the unintended consequence is that these folks are eligible for unemployment benefits, which are our cost. We're not paying unemployment insurance. We're self-insured. So those are expenses that we're incurring as a school district that are not included in this budget at all. So for every 4 teachers that are laid off, you're effectively losing the salary of 1 full teacher you then have to account for somehow. So it's, you know, an unintended consequence, but a reality that we need to be aware of when we're making those decisions.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much for expanding on that. And if you wouldn't mind, could you go back to slide 11? Yeah, so this slide, I also think it's worth dwelling on for a little bit and really absorbing this in, because these are, you know, $6.5 million of just increases to our obligations. Then that's all completely out of our control, and that's over the amount that we would typically get with the average on 2.5% increase. So yeah, and again, it's you know, what you were saying before, these are things that we're not trying to even increase programming. These are just increases in the price of level service, doing business of what we were doing before. I think, you know, it's worth mentioning the decrease in the grant and revolving funds. Lucas or Bob, please feel free to chime in and expand on this. But I mean, that was like a one-time thing from last year. There was, you know, a way of us to try to use a tool in our toolkit, and we did it. Now we can't do that anymore. It was really us trying to use everything that we can to cover our expenses, and it's not something that is where you can come back to the well again for. So I really think this is also just such an important piece of the picture for the public to be aware of and really understand that these are things that are out of our control, and they're a big reason for the situation that we're in. And I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to expand upon that, either Bob or Lucas.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that it's never a good idea to fully deplete your reserves. The town doesn't do it. They have policies in place that forbid them from doing it and require them to have a certain percentage of their previous year's budget available, either in free cash or stabilization funds. It impacts their borrowing ability if they go below those amounts. And there's reasons that you don't want to do them. And the primary reason is that it's A, not sustainable, and B, put you in a difficult situation when you do have a rainy day. And this certainly represents a rainy day, and it's going to continue to be exponential over time. It's just the reality of how it is, unless there's an influx of funding.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for all the work that you've done on this. Yeah, we certainly are going to have some hard decisions to make on both the budget subcommittee in the next weeks and months ahead, as well as the full school committee. And yeah, we'll take that work very seriously as we move forward. So thank you again for putting this together.
Thank you. Erin Gallagher.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you talking about retaining teachers and having teachers who are well resourced and have the supports and the breathing room to be creative, to find new ways to teach, to explore and to grow. And the bare minimum doesn't get the community or the culture of support that those things bring for our families and for our kids. I'm thinking back to what Jen Levine talked about earlier in the night with, kids who aren't engaged in extra activities or things after school who, end up in utilizing some of their programming and the opportunities here to go beyond the minimum for our kids and for the community. One question that I do have, I have heard people asking what other funding sources are available. And I know we spent some time in the budget workshop the other week discussing this. I'd love if you could briefly touch on, the challenges there are to be reliant on, let's just say, grants, like the challenges that come with that you can't rely on that in your annual budget. If you could talk a little bit about why that's the case and the challenges that Franklin has approaching grants as a whole, not that we don't go for them, but on relying on them.
Sure. I can start, Bob, and then if you want to fill in, competitive grants more recently have become less and less for districts such as Franklin, suburban districts. I've had this conversation with the town as well around grant opportunities, urban districts, urban settings, in an effort to try to assist those districts. It seems that sometimes we'll apply for a grant and it will say right in it, if you are not from one of these larger metropolis areas, you won't be eligible. So that's one piece. The other piece I'd say is we still continue. You may have seen the press release for Project Lead the Way and the 1-8 Foundation and the middle school grants that Mr. Stark has worked really hard with that company to provide. So we go out for grants that align with our curriculum, align with our vision for educating students. And when those are available, we try to take advantage of every resource we have. It has just become more and more difficult. And I don't know if it's a function of funding across the state or where we're putting funding, but we can't rely, because that Project Lead the Way grant is available today, but that's not something that we can count on sustainably being allowed year after year. I brought up last year, Dr. Frazier was able to find grant funding for some literacy materials that helped us get a 5-year contract for the literacy implementation. We received the remaining amount in the capital funding request. But if you recall, it was basically like $250 or $300,000 for 1 year. But if you spend 500, you got 5 years. So it went from 300,000 for a year per year to 100,000 per year. And we're talking a K through 6 enrollment, like all schools, all students. So these are just examples. We go for grants and we do everything we can to try to take advantage of those. Those are documented in our proposal, in our information. And I know that in the workshop, we hit on that in a little more detail because we had a 3-hour meeting dedicated to budget. But certainly, Dr. Dutch, can you hit on grants? And then I would also open it up to Mrs. Morano and Dr. Rogers as well, who have a hand in grant funding as well.
Sure. There are really two components of the entitlement grants. Lucas spoke to the competitive grants. The entitlement grants are those that we get because we're a school district, but they're tied to either usually socioeconomic capacity within the school district and the student population within the district, which has had a definite impact in the decline for us. But they're also tied to the availability of funds throughout the state. And as we look at circuit breaker for next year, the governor's budget has decreased the revenue from the state available for circuit breakers. So we can expect the same or less than we're getting this year for circuit breaker. And the same could be true for Title I, for the special ed grant, IDEA. So they're unknowns, they're unpredictable. You'd like to assume that they'll at least be the same as the previous year. But we don't know that given the revenue challenges that the state is having moving forward.
If I may, the only additional thing I would add in regards to the competitive grants that Mr. Jagir spoke about, when we're talking about grants that help us fund high quality instructional materials. So he spoke about Project Lead the Way. We've had an Open SciEd one. We've had ST Math. We've had some illustrative math. Like we've gone for these grants, but oftentimes a component of these grants do also require us to fund some money. So there will be increases in instructional material line items, professional development, things of that nature. So though we're getting financial resources to help us fund kind of staying innovative and keeping those high quality instructional materials in front of students, there's also a component of our obligation to maintain financial pieces as well.
They want to make sure you have skin in the game when receiving funding for those. And the other piece I'd mentioned, just to build off of what Dr. Rogers said, is sometimes, when we think about our staffing, we receive grants to train our staff in specific educational models, instructional models, civics. And then if we're in a volatile kind of cut cycle, some of those people that we spent time and money and energy training leave the district. And that's part of it. I would have mentioned that Dave McNeil question around some of the impacts of that kind of turnstile.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for all the additional info. And, I know certainly there are the great grant announcements that come out when we do get them. But thank you for sharing info on, how that we can't rely on those for budgetary reasons for the year.
Yeah, and just Erin, just real quick to just build off of that. I want to be clear that we look to receive as many grants as possible that support our system. We are all about opportunities for grant money because it's a no-brainer in that regard. It's just I think your question kind of leads to a point around maybe someone in our community who maybe isn't up to speed or didn't have this information would say, well, why can't you just supplement your budget with grants? And that's just not a reality, that there's not enough grant money out there to cover the situation that we described tonight. So it's a supplemental, but it will not supplant the deficit that we have. I think we have a math problem on our hands, and this is coming from a taxpayer as well. I think we have a math problem when it comes to how we're able to fund our schools at this point.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lucas.
Thank you. And Paul?
Yeah. So, first, thank you so much. I know that the efforts that go into trying to put all this together is really a lot. Yeah, it's, a few slides for us, a few slides for the public, but really the amount of effort that goes into this, both from the administration and the principals at these schools, I really don't think can be understated. For me, I think, really the point that comes across most clearly here is that we're really at a crossroads in understanding that decisions we make now are what we're going to either suffer from or reap the benefits from in the long run. We've been at this cycle a little bit now. We've had some parents and some people in the community really get engaged. And that's been great to see, when we start feeling the pain associated with, like programs getting cut and some things getting dialed back. But I think what people really need to understand is that we quite honestly haven't seen anything yet. We cut where we were, I think, not to say we've been able to or that we haven't suffered for it, but we've cut in those few places that we can survive, at least for now. If we have to continue down this road, just looking at the concept of the different proposals, the different models that we have, survive should not be one of those approaches. That should be the last resort, is that we just try to keep things together, and we're able to continue offering what is otherwise a whole and complete package. The kids are able to get what they need. They have the after school programs, they have the sports, they have the mental support that we really, really need, especially in this day and age. And yet that's what we're hoping for. Just kind of be frank there, it's not the position we should be in. We should be here trying to say, all right, do we think we should be, reasonable on some levels and really shoot for the stars on others? And we're just hoping that we don't have to, reduce programs and positions. Kind of, I think, Lucas has done a great job of trying to illustrate this delicately and politely. But quite frankly, we've just about run out of programs and positions to cut that aren't really going to hurt. And I think people need to pay attention to this now, where it's not something where, great, in a couple of months, questions come up about how we get this additional funding, or during the budget process with the town, if people are wondering, why next year do we have concerns over math teachers? Why do we have concerns over programs that, kids used to be able to participate in, but now they have to pay for? Why do we have concerns about mental health when kids don't have any additional supports, in school, after school, or just kind of in the overall community? This is that discussion right now. This is that opportunity right now. This is that realization that we don't really have anything else to fall back on. We are, as Lucas pointed out, it's a math problem. And it's one that I think we need to be very honest about. Level service, this concept of survive, means that we're going to be having the same conversation next year. It's going to be just as hard. It's going to be just as difficult, and it's going to be just as frank, where it's like, hey, we can try to hold on for a little bit longer, but it's not going to be a small jump all of a sudden. It's still going to be a significant amount of money that is going to need to be laid out here because of the quality of the teachers that we have, because of the types of programs that we offer these students. It comes at a cost to really have that kind of, high quality education. It also sets it up where we're going to be constantly challenged. We had some teachers on tonight as a great example. Just recency bias is always helpful, that have been here for 17 plus years. Well, if we're not going to be able to ensure that teachers are going to have a job year to year, or we're going to have any kind of new talent coming in that actually wants to stay because they know that this is a place where they are valued, we're not going to be able to say this in another 5-10 years. We're going to be excited when we have a 5-year veteran of the program, because everybody else has been in and out so many times because we can't actually set a budget. We can't actually do what we need to do to make sure to retain them, and better yet, to recruit, the really strong teachers that we've been able to do so far. So I think, as we kind of go into this, looking at where we're standing, what we need to look at, if we don't start looking at the concept of stabilize and partially restore, or to actually thrive, we're not being realistic with what we actually need to be doing here. And and really where this needs to set up. I'd pose the question to Lucas. No good answer is going to come of it, and I don't actually expect an answer, so I'll keep talking through. But what's next? Really, after this point, what do we have left to cut? If we come down, if we say, all right, great, $2 million is just too rich. 1.8, like, what does that really do to what people are experiencing now?
So if you go to slide, Tina, can you go to slide 16, 17? So, I think I need to be honest with everyone. We're looking at anything less than level service, depending on the percentage increase, is going to have a huge impact. When we look at, I think I'm on 16, probably illustrates this best, Paul. When I say programmatic changes, depending on how below that level service marker is really indicative of how deep the cuts go. But I think you're beyond just cutting a few teachers here or there. You're looking at programmatic shifts. So the way we do business, the way we educate by level could change. If I look at increases to fees, I think we'd be looking at fee structures that it's like, okay, if we're going to continue in order to offer this co-curricular activity, this athletic activity, it's going to cost this much money because it almost needs to work as a self-sustained model. I think it's going to price out. It would be detrimental. The other piece I just would mention is I've experienced, people have reached out to me about, class sizes and some of the turnover that have occurred throughout the year. And we've had resignations mid-year. And, I know we're not alone in that across the state. We're seeing that more and more post-COVID, but I'm not blaming COVID anymore. I think we need to really look deep at the services we're providing, who we're hiring, and whether they're staying in the roles. And I think that all of the things that have risen to the top of becoming problematic for us are things that I think in the spring, we didn't set our foundation up for the best success. And so in an unhealthy budget, you're basically you're trying to do everything you can with what you have, but when it falls, it exacerbates an issue. So, having the right teachers, the right amount of teachers, having class sizes in a space where we want them, and then offering all the other types of supports, whether it's counseling support, special education support, it's all part of that ecosystem that works. So I think we've experienced it, but ultimately this slide illustrates the deficit and the level of cuts that would need to happen. We're a human business, as I said. 86% of our budget is salaries. So there's not much in supplies that can make up ground when you're talking about millions of dollars. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that's, you point that out well. And I think it's also important to note that, as you're talking about these cuts, it's an overall shift in how we do business. And there's also a difference in what we're able to actually provide the students. I think it has been one thing as we look at some of the different programs that have been cut and who's been impacted by that. But what comes to mind for me is, you look at some of our biggest successes. Do we think we can continue to field the kind of support for the athletics programs that we have to see the successes that we do if students are going to have to foot the entire bill for the equipment and the coaches? Like that, You think about some of these costs, like they're at some point in time, if we have to sit there and evaluate, do I want more teachers in the school, or do I want to be able to fund, fantastic sports programs? I think we'd be remiss if we didn't look at everything on the table. So I think that's one of those things that people really need to start understanding, is that there's not a simple way out. Everyone on this committee, I think we're all here for the same reason. We really have a passion for this. We want to make sure that our students are getting the best possible education, the best possible experience that they can possibly get. But we're looking at a situation where we're not going to be able to do that for everyone equally unless we start making some really hard choices. And I think another part that you brought up that was actually really insightful is how much this can impact what people have thought of as kind of our emergency relief valves. We keep on hearing, let's get grants. Let's talk to, any kind of outside source, or, this is the money that we need right now. But the ability to really, going back to the idea of surviving versus, actually thriving, if we had the ability to, for our, for some of our curriculums, if we could do a 5-year program for multiple curriculum, different areas,
Save a lot of money.
we could save a ton, and that carries forward. So great. We have a larger budget this year. We spend $500,000 on 3 different types of curricula right now, and it saves us $100,000 for each year for the next 4. Like, we can get back in that position where we're actually able to benefit our students. We're able to help really support and get on that kind of level where we are actually doing better financially because we can invest money. And the other part, and looking at, touching on the grants again, is a lot of these programs that, and you've talked to this before, they want to see that we care enough to fund this ourselves when that money is gone. So if we're looking for a grant, if we're in a competitive situation with grants that could potentially bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars into our system, and yet another school program can demonstrate that they will actually continue to care enough about what that's funding after it's gone, they're going to get that money. And we're going to be in the same exact situation where people are asking us why we don't get any grants. And it's because we're not willing to step up to the plate ourselves as soon as those grants are done. It's a lot easier to be able to get them when we can show, hey, you're augmenting a fantastic program. You're augmenting something that we're able to run with. Just help us get things set up, help us get things moving. But if we're not willing to kick in the bare minimum to actually support those systems ourselves, no one's giving us money simply because we're asking. They're giving us money to try and benefit as many people as possible and try to benefit the students, not to do something for a year and then have, next year we just say, oh, sorry, we can't pay for that, and it's gone. So I think, really looking at that and the concept of investment here can't be, we really can't fall short on that. We have to make sure people understand just how much you can really save, how much of a benefit it is, and how much money it lets us bring into this community by making the reasonable and the sound investments now, so that we can be better, even better stewards of all these responsibilities in the future.
Just to affirm your point, Paul, Mr. Stark came in my office one day and said, "Hey, just want to let you know, I applied for this grant, but they had questions. Just, are you able to sustain this over time? What's your commitment to the program?" So I would just say to you that it's a reality, and I don't know if that's a Franklin specific question or if it's just the state of budgets across the state in Massachusetts with districts, but ultimately the commitment piece with grants is huge on following through. We intend to do that in all cases that we apply for them, but it's a good point. So, yeah.
I think the points are pretty well, pretty clear at this point. Everyone else has done a really great job of, kind of diving into specifics. But I think people need to start thinking about this from their own personal impacts. Mm-hmm. If we come to 2.5%, I highly doubt we're going to have any family who's not impacted in one way or another during this process. Mm-hmm. Like that's really the choice. It's no longer, well, my kid doesn't do that activity, or, oh, my kid doesn't, we don't do the after school programs, or, oh, we have other programs that we do. But when your students are having trouble in a subject and the teacher can't spend as much time with them, if they're having mental health problems and that, it's just on you, it starts changing a lot. And I think if we get down that road, if we've already gone past this point, it's much, much harder to dig our way back out. So I really want to make sure that everyone listening is thinking about that part. Staying the course and finally starting to invest allows us to really get out of this faster and get into a situation where we can talk about great things in new directions from a point of strength. After this, we got to try to get back up to level. And you think about if we're at 2.5% now versus what our level services budget is, fine. Next year, if we're 5% below what level services is again, well, you have to compound that back. Right. We're not just 5% below. We're 7.5% now, plus 5%, and it just compounds and it continues to go. And this is a cycle that we've been in. I've looked back at the past few years. There's not been a year when people come in and say, "Hey, great, we're going to give the school an extra 20%. You guys really invest. You have all these great plans. You can do a whole lot of great things." Now, granted, I understand 20% is huge, but the concept of we need to do more has not been a part of the conversation for a while. It's do more with less. And I think less is done now. Now we're just trying to keep our heads above water. So we need to make that choice. Thanks, Dave.
All right, absolutely. Thank you. All incredibly powerful statements, great questions all throughout. But as I mentioned, I'll kind of start back at the top with Al. If there's any other questions or comments any other committee members have, we'll just cycle through once more.
Yeah, no additional comments. I feel like everything I was thinking has been said. I think it really just comes down to what do we want to be known for and stability. I mean, I know when I go someplace, if I was looking for a job, first thing I'm gonna ask is, what's the culture like? What's the longevity? Where do you see yourself in 5-10 years in this company? And if somebody says, I can barely tell you where I'll be, come June, I'm not gonna even bother applying, So it's what do we want to be known as? So we're definitely in an impasse at this point, and I think we have to put our money where our values are.
Mm-hmm.
I took a meeting with President Elmore from Dean College, and it was a great meeting. It was motivating. It was like a think tank, and we talked about how we could help support each other, but ultimately serve the students pre-K through college level across all levels, and try to think about that. And it was engaging. We talked about different ways in which we could bridge, high school and college and try to do that. But you need people to teach the courses. You need a solid staff where I can't be balancing kindergarten class sizes. That's the granular level where we're at, because we can't. So it's like everything sounds great, but we can't innovate in those ways if we don't have the people and the staff to do those things. So I just put that out there. We're definitely in a reduction mentality, but there are investments through this that I think I'd love to illustrate as we continue through this budget process, because there's other things that we are looking to do. Mrs. Morano and her team have ideas on how we can re-visualize if we had a healthy budget and do some things. Dr. Rogers and her team, the same thing. And I think it's hard to discuss. I've used this analogy. I think I used it at FinCom last year. It's like you're renting a house and you can't make the rent, but then someone's asking you, what type of pool liner do you want if we were able to put a pool in here? It's like, well, I can't even think about the pool. I got to pay the rent. So it's that kind of juxtaposition. And I think we have some really talented people that work in this district that want to do right by kids, continue to be creative in how we do that. And we're just looking to have a healthy budget that supports our ability to do that. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So I'll keep going down the row, Ruth Ann.
Just a couple things. I'm sure there's parents listening or watching on TV that aren't listed here that are just like, well, what do we do? So I do think that it's worth mentioning that, if you want to be a part of our advocacy for the schools, you can email the town council and just there's been, Tom Mercer has said our town needs an override. Patrick Sheridan has said, there's a really big difference between whether you have 26 kids in your class or 21. He teaches himself. Ted Cormier-Ledger, Melanie, Kobe, these people have been around and advocating, so they're going to be really supportive. So if you want to email the town council and ask them to not just put this on the ballot, but help educate the community as to why we need this, and what it's going to do for our home values that we've loved to have risen and things like that. So I just want to encourage people to kind of be a part of the process. And then, my fellow school committee members, I'm going to be at as many FinCom, as many town council meetings as I can, because we can't explain this stuff enough. I've been listening to the same Chapter 72 slides for 4 years, so I can imagine how it feels for, people who've been in the district for a while. They kind of present on these issues all the time. And then there's a ballot question committee out there organizing. OneFranklinMA.com is where I can direct people to get answers about that if you want to get involved. So that's what you can do to help us, to help you, and to help our kids, and to help our educators. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Dave McNeil.
Yeah, I think that's certainly enough for us to process one night. So no, I don't have any further questions now. But yeah, we'll be having some tough decisions in our very near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron Gallagher.
Yeah, I think I'd just say that, that Thrive mentality is good and supportive for our students, and as a result for our families, and as a result for the town. So.
And Paul?
I didn't get it out already. I think it's pretty well covered. So thanks, Dave.
Absolutely. So again, I just want to, Lucas, Dr. Dutch, the entire central office staff, and all the admins that have been part of kind of building this, and really these 4 budgets. I greatly appreciate that. I know that, this was one of the big things that came around during the last budget season. That was something that during a vote, I really kind of wrestled with myself, just talking about looking at all the things that weren't even on the radar, that were just kind of getting cut because we just straight up could not afford it. And so I'm really glad that we can kind of present to the entire community right now. Here's all of the actions that are going to get, that may be on the chopping block. Here, exactly is what might happen if it's a 2.5% increase, a 3.5% increase. I know that adds so much more work, but I think that just kind of having that laid out now, it gets away from hopefully, some of the surprise. I know that, Lucas, we've had conversations before. We kind of talk about, we're not making performative cuts.
Right.
We're not just, straight saying, well, we're just going to, eliminate all middle school clubs because we think it might, rile, get the community and rally them behind, helping to increase the school's budget in the following year. These are just, very hard realities that we're facing, and consequences of the budgetary situation that we've been in for a number of years. But I do see Committee Member Al Charles. I think you have something else you wanted to say.
Just a little levity for the night. It's 10 o'clock, David. You're speaking again. So do we need to extend the meeting?
For a little bit of context, that was the old norms, and the prior chair had some rules in place. I think specifically just to kind of muzzle me at 10 p.m. There's been a changing of the guard, and no, those rules aren't in place. So I want to continue to speak. But thanks, Al. No, I appreciate that. I do also want to say that Dr. Dutch, you had mentioned talking about utilizing like the revolving accounts, and about how there are policies in place in which there's not like an overutilization. And one of these things that was presented at a prior meeting, Lucas, you had shared, it was like 20 years worth of cuts and reductions. Every single budget season. And one of the big recurring themes that kind of kept coming up on that was you would see this line that goes against school committee policy, overutilization of the circuit breaker. And others goes against school committee policy and overutilization of this revolving account or another account. And I really just kind of bring that up to say, for the community at large, that this isn't an FY25 issue. This is a systemic issue that's been facing this community for 20 plus years, and there's been a number of situations where there's been cuts, there's been reductions, there's been situations in which we've gone against our own policy and overutilized either revolving accounts or circuit breakers. But this isn't anything new. This has been a culmination of decades of just lower than we'd hoped for budgetary budgets. And one thing, what I'll just leave on this note too, is something that kind of came up during that budget workshop. And Lucas, again, I really appreciate that we had this, and we had this opportunity to kind of hear from so many admin. But one of the things that came about was from Principal Hanna. He was talking about all the success that we always hear about during so many of these school committee meetings and just elsewhere. But when we're talking about all the success, that the ceiling isn't the students. The ceiling of our success, or really their success, is the budget. Because at the end of the day, the students can only perform at the level that we financially can help support them. And, just as we heard from last year, I remember when the math specialist came and talked about all the great intervention that they were able to provide, and they were able to provide support for like 28% of the students. That wasn't the ceiling. There wasn't, only 28% of the students that needed their services. We could only afford to be able to provide services to 28% of the student populace. And so, I think when we kind of hear about so many great success stories that we have from athletics and from the arts and from just academics, that all of that success seems to be kind of constantly capped at these budgetary constraints that we have. But again, I appreciate all the work that went into this, all the amazing kind of questions and comments from all my committee members, except that very last one from my friend, Mr. Charles. But unless there's any other questions or comments, I really, again, thank you so much. Appreciate all the work that went into this.
Dr. Dutch and your team for helping get this organized in a way. And I think what we'll do is continue to build off this and share more and more detail as we move along. Obviously, we have the budget proposal, the superintendent's recommended budget next meeting, which will communicate out more materials and information. And thank you for the feedback on the slides. If you have additional feedback that you think would be important to either put in context or expound on or whatnot, please just email me and or Dr. Dutch directly, and we can make sure to incorporate some of those ideas. Okay?
Thank you very much. Yep. All right. So then with that, now we'll just go down to discussion action item C, 2024-25 school calendar vote.
Thank you. I'll kick it over to Dr. Rogers. She's done a tremendous amount of work in this area, reaching out, getting a sense of how the year plays out and where best suits us to have, the calendar kind of lay out over those 180 days for students. So, Dr. Rogers, do you want to take it and just talk through your process and then share the calendar?
Sure thing. Do you all have the calendar, or would you like me to share a screen? You have the calendar. Okay. So just for a frame of reference, this was the second consecutive year that we put a calendar out for vote to all staff in Franklin Public Schools. So what we do is put out 2 proposals for how to kick off the year. So this year there was a calendar A and a calendar B option. The calendar before you is calendar A, in which staff voted we had 196 staff members respond back in December, with 74% of folks selecting what you see in front of you today, with having the week of school start on August 26th for staff, with a PD day on August 27th, first day for first through 12th grade starting on the 28th, kindergarten on the 29th, and then having that 30th day off for all students and staff. So that was a particular vote they voted on, rather than having school on Friday. So that resulted in the 180th day of school being June 17th. So that was the vote put out to all members in the district. Then we went on to do some analysis of which days of the week are half days on. We typically do 10 half days, which involve professional development throughout the district. Some of those are teacher directed days, others are level-based days, others are district-wide days, to really ensure that we have enough time from a professional learning perspective to kind of continue to move the work forward as it relates to curriculum, instruction. New IEP is another avenue that Mrs. Morano and her staff have been working with our staff on. So the calendar in front of you, we also did move, if you note, in November, we tried to remove half days from November. It tends to be a real disjointed month, is the feedback we've received from a variety of stakeholders. So we removed all half days from November, and also moved the conferences to Thursday, Friday, in hopes that that would provide a little bit more flexibility for folks. And then in March, the pre-K to 8 conferences were on a Tuesday and Wednesday to try to kind of vary that for families. So in addition to what you see here, we do meet with FEA leadership before bringing this to you all to talk through placements of days and kind of purpose. We're going to continue to work with them through purpose of days. As we develop a PD plan, we have a PD committee that meets regularly, which is a joint committee. So we'll continue that effort. And then with that, the only other additional piece I would note is that we are continuing also. Last year, the school committee voted to attach kind of additional documentation as it relates to cultural and religious holidays that are not observed as days off in the calendar, but kind of call into account student handbook language and school committee policy, which allow folks to take time off for observed holidays that are not part of the calendar. So we're working to amend the dates as was approved to be added to the calendar for last year. So we just don't have those dates yet. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
All right. Thank you very much. Starting with Al Charles.
All right, great. Thank you. I love how these calendars evolve year over year. I feel like they get better and better with time. I only have one piece of feedback, which I did last year. We're all close to this, and we all know that parent-teacher conference days are half days. Can we just have in the legend that it explicitly says half day on there, similar to how we have like early release day for students on the professional development day to the right of it? So I think that just makes it a little bit clearer, because I know that's one thing I hear a lot of people like, oh, it's parent-teacher conference. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's a half day as well. Or, they ask that question. So if we can just get ahead of that, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
But other than that, no, I think this is a great calendar. Actually, no, one last piece. And we have 5 potential days for snow days, correct? So can we also list what the last day would be if we had to use all those snow days in June, just so folks can see that as well?
Certainly.
Thank you. But on that, great job. Looking, like I said, I love the evolution of this.
Thank you. Ruth Ann?
No questions. Looks good to me.
McNeil?
No questions, but thank you very much for all the work you put into this. Really appreciate it.
Erin?
No questions for me either. Thanks.
And thank you. And Paul?
No questions for me. Thank you.
All right. Terrific. Lucas, if you want to go ahead.
Sorry. I recommend approval of the 24-25 school calendar as discussed.
All right. Terrific. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. And roll call. Al Charles?
Yes.
Ruth Ann?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes.
Erin Gallagher?
Yes.
And Paul?
Yes.
And Dave Callahan, yes. All right. Motion passes. Excellent. All right. Then we'll move on to discussion only items, except quarterly reports.
Might be frozen.
Oh. All right, let's see.
I can promote him to panelist as soon as he logs in.
All right. Well, how about this? Just in the interest of time, while we're waiting for that, we'll just kind of just go down to school committee subcommittee reports. We may, starting with budget.
Yes, thank you. Budget didn't meet since our last meeting. However, we did have that workshop on the, I believe it was the 26th, as was alluded to. That was for the entire school committee, where we heard from admin and building principals about their budget needs, and a lot of that informed tonight's budget presentation as well. I believe it was also alluded to that we're going to be having the joint budget subcommittee meeting on March 6th. So please mark your calendars for that. And then, as Lucas mentioned, in addition to that, we'll be entering our budget season with the superintendent's proposal and reviews starting next month. So yeah, very busy budget time for us.
All right. How about policy?
Nothing major to report, just a couple grammar revisions. Next week, there'll be a proposed new policy on, what was it? It was admittance of foreign exchange students. So that'll be something that'll probably end up coming before the full committee, but nothing for you guys to vote on right now.
Thank you. Community relations.
We met yesterday. We confirmed the dates for Strawberry School and Harvest Fest. So for all of you, please mark your calendars, June 7th from 4 to 8. Looking to see if we can get all of us to represent at some point during that day. And then September 28th from 12 to 5 is the fest. Both of those are non-rated date days, and the rated date the day after. So more to come on that. We did talk about the work that's being done to identify a company to service our website. So we'll use whomever we end up using. There's an opportunity to have a newsletter built in and actually have subscription and messaging out to that. So that's something that we're looking forward to, hopefully in time for the start of next school year. In the meantime, we are working on the March newsletter. So we'll have something put together for that just to get folks aware. Won't be as high tech as the website, but at least it's something just to drive attention and make sure folks are checked in and on the ongoings of the school committee. Our next meeting is set for March 4th at 5 p.m.
All right. Thank you. And how about joint PCC?
We did not meet this month due to a conflict. So our next meeting is actually on March 12th.
All right. And thank you. Mental health and well-being.
We haven't met since the last time. This is monthly, but we did have a table at the Panther Pride last night. That was just kind of a way for, and we had a parent volunteer, Sarah Mabardi, who sort of made the table and was kind of letting the incoming 8th graders know that they don't have to excel in every area of every club and every athletic. They can take a little pressure off, because we consistently hear that is the kryptonite of a high schooler, is that pressure. So we just tried to get them to realize it's supposed to make school fun, these things, and give you a little bit of creative. So that went really well.
Excellent. DEI committee.
The next meeting is after February break.
Thank you. And what about SWAC, school wellness?
Next meeting is scheduled for March 5th.
Terrific. Thank you. And then just a comprehensive facility assessment. We had our last meeting. McKibben had presented his demographic studies, which really kind of talked about like the population trends that we are seeing around town, that dip in enrollment, but that slow kind of gradual increase moving forward in a couple of years, along with a lot of potential for turnover in the next decade. And so it's really kind of setting the stage for just like moving forward with the rest of the comprehensive facility, really like master planning that we're doing. The next meeting was scheduled for March 6th, but that's going to be postponed so we can kind of put the focus on the joint budget subcommittee. So we'll let everybody know once we have a meeting date set. So, but I do see that Superintendent Jagir, I believe, is back. And so if let's go back to the accept quarterly report.
Thank you. Sorry, I had internet issues. So the accept quarterly report is just that. It's a quarterly report I will be sharing throughout the year. So it's just open for any questions you may have, but ultimately they're just reporting out on what's going on as we are a member of Accept Collaborative. And I'm on the board of directors. They share that just to keep you up to speed. There's no vote, no action, just an update on what's happening.
Thank you very much. I'll just kind of go down. Al, Charles, any questions?
Nope, no questions.
All right. Ruth Ann?
Nope, I'm good.
Dave?
What about you?
Aaron?
Nope, no questions.
And Paul?
None for me. Thank you.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you. Then we can move to consent agenda.
Okay, I recommend approval of the minutes from your January 23rd, 2024 school committee meeting as detailed. I recommend approval of the request of Rebecca Motti for the recurring Save the Bay trip to Colt State Park in Bristol, Rhode Island on May 30th and May 31st, 2024 as detailed. I recommend acceptance of several checks totaling $6,664 for in-house enrichment for the music department as detailed. I recommend acceptance of a grant for $2,000 from General Dynamics for supplemental supplies for the robotics club as detailed. I recommend approval of the request of Laurel Troutier to take the second grade students to Roger Williams Zoo in Providence, Rhode Island on May 31st as detailed.
All right. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, roll call vote. Al, Charles?
Yes.
Ruth Ann?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
And Callahan, yes. Motion passes. All right. Next up, we have good of the order. Again, just an opportunity for any school committee members to kind of talk about ways or ideas in which might be able to improve this committee itself. Any kind of questions at all from any members? Feel free to. Actually, I'll go down the list. Al?
None this time.
All right. Ruth Ann?
Nope, thanks.
McNeil?
None, thank you.
Aaron?
No, thank you.
And Paul?
None at this time.
All right. And then citizens' comments. Are there any citizens in the audience who would like to make a comment on an item not on tonight's agenda and falls within the committee purview? All right. It's a little too late for that, it seems like, but then we'll move on then, seeing none, to new business. Is there any discuss any future agenda items?
Okay, so as I previously shared, it'll be the month of March is it's budget. So we'll do a recommended budget and then a budget hearing, and that will be the majority of the things that we cover. So.
All right, excellent. And then so with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, let's do it quick. Al?
Yep.
Ruth Ann?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
And Callahan, yes, as well. Motion passes. Thank you all so much. I greatly appreciate it all.
Great. Thank you.
Great.
All right, hey, have a good night, everybody.
Have a
All
good
right,
night.
you too. Thank you.
We're good on.
Thank you.